Chapter 1. The System Awakens. Chapter 1. The System Awakens. The world swims into focus through a haze of pain and confusion. Scott's consciousness claws its way back from darkness, dragging fragments of memory that clash like broken glass in his skull. A child's scream, the impact of metal on bone, the bitter taste of blood. His eyes snap open to a cracked ceiling, plaster dust drifting down like snow, and the distant sound of screams that pierce the Atlanta morning. What the hell happened to me? He tries to sit up and immediately regrets it. Pain lances through his ribs, and his head pounds with a rhythm that doesn't match his heartbeat. The apartment around him looks like a hurricane hit it. Overturned furniture, scattered papers, a television hanging at an angle from the wall with its screen spider-webbed black. But that's not what makes his hands shake. The memories are wrong, all wrong. He remembers being Scott Alen, 28 years old, EMT with the Atlanta Fire Department. 5 years on the job. Good at his work, reliable under pressure, the guy they called when the situation went sideways. He remembers his apartment on Peachtree Street, his ex-girlfriend Sarah, the argument they'd had about commitment before she moved out. He also remembers sitting on his couch 3 nights ago, microwave dinner growing cold on his lap, watching The Walking Dead on his laptop. Season 1, Episode 1. Rick Grimes waking up in that hospital bed, the world gone to hell while he slept. And then, the call. Emergency response needed. A school bus accident on I-85, children trapped inside while the driver bled out. He remembers suiting up, the rush of adrenaline, the controlled chaos of the scene. He remembers a little girl, maybe 6 years old, crying for her mother as the bus started to shift on the embankment. The memory sharpens like a knife edge. He'd gone back for her. The bus was sliding, metal screaming against concrete, but he'd gone back because that's what you do. That's what he'd sworn to do when he took the oath. The impact, the darkness, the certainty that he'd died saving her. But I'm not dead, am I? Scott's vision blurs, and for a moment he thinks it's blood. Then the blue glow resolves into something impossible, text floating in the air like a hologram, crisp and clear against the chaos of the apartment. System initialization complete. Welcome, player. Survive, grow, rebuild. The words pulse once, then fade to a translucent overlay in the corner of his vision. His heart hammers against his ribs as new text appears, formatted like something out of a video game. Level 1, HP, 85 100ths. Stamina, 65 100ths. Mana, 50-50. This isn't real. This can't be real. I'm hallucinating. Concussion. Has to be a concussion. But even as he thinks it, Scott's EMT training kicks in. He presses fingers to his temple, checking for swelling, for the telltale signs of traumatic brain injury. Nothing. His pupils respond normally to light. No nausea, no disorientation beyond the impossible circumstances. And the apartment, he recognizes this place. Not from his life as Scott Alen, but from somewhere else. Somewhere he shouldn't know. The layout matches the first episode of The Walking Dead. The building where Rick found the bicycle girl. Where the apocalypse had been raging for weeks while he slept in his hospital bed. 3 days into the outbreak, Scott whispers, and his voice cracks like he hasn't used it in years. This is 3 days in. The distant screaming suddenly makes sense. So does the acrid smell of smoke drifting through the broken window, the sporadic gunfire echoing between buildings, the unnatural quiet that comes when a city dies. Scott forces himself to stand, legs shaking. The system interface adjusts with his movement, always staying in the periphery of his vision like a heads-up display. He stumbles to the window and looks down at the street. Atlanta is burning. Cars sit abandoned in the intersection below, some with doors hanging open like mouths frozen mid-scream. A few bodies lie on the sidewalk, but they're not moving. One of them wears a nurse's uniform stained dark with blood. Another clutches a cell phone, its screen cracked but still glowing. And scattered among the stillness, shapes that move with unnatural jerky motions. Too distant to make out clearly, but Scott's enhanced memories supply the details his eyes can't. Walkers. Impossible. Impossible, impossible, impossible. But the evidence surrounds him. The apartment, the city, the timing, it all matches. He died in his world and woke up in the Walking Dead universe. With a video game system floating in his vision and the knowledge that everyone he's looking at down there is already dead or will be soon. A soft chime draws his attention back to the interface. New text has appeared. Tutorial initialization. Primary objective. Survive your first encounter. Warning. Hostile detected. Approaching your location. Skill available. Analyze, reveal target information. Hostile. What? The apartment door explodes inward. The thing that stumbles through used to be human. Male, maybe 40 years old, wearing the tattered remains of a business suit. But humanity has leaked out of it like air from a punctured tire, leaving behind something driven purely by hunger. Its skin has gone gray-green, eyes milky and unfocused, and when it opens its mouth Scott sees blackened teeth and a tongue that's almost black. The smell hits him like a physical blow, decay and rot and something worse underneath, something that makes his EMT training scream warnings about infection and disease. The walker's head swivels toward him with mechanical precision. A low moan bubbles up from its throat, and it lurches forward with clumsy, determined steps. Analyze mana cost. 10. The skill activates without conscious thought. Information overlays the walker like a character sheet. Walker, male, stage 2 decay. HP, 30/30ths. Weaknesses: head trauma, decapitation. Threat level: low. Infection risk: moderate. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. But insane or not, the walker is closing distance fast. 20 feet. 15. Scott's training takes over. Assess the threat, identify available resources, act decisively. The kitchen counter holds a knife block, mostly empty but with one handle protruding. Scott's hand closes around it as the walker reaches the living room. The blade comes free, a chef's knife, 8 inches of steel with a decent point. Not ideal, but it'll have to do. Aim for the head. In the show, you have to destroy the brain. The walker stumbles over an overturned coffee table, and Scott sees his chance. He steps forward, angling the knife upward, and drives it into the thing's temple just behind the eye socket. The resistance is horrible, like pushing through hard cheese, but the blade punches through with a wet crunch. The walker goes rigid for one impossible moment, then collapses like a marionette with cut strings. Dark fluid spreads across the carpet. The smell gets worse. Walker eliminated. Experience gained. 50 XP. Level up. 1 right pointing arrow 2. New stat points available. 5. Health restored. 100/100ths. The rush of leveling up is indescribable. Energy floods through Scott's body, washing away the pain in his ribs and the exhaustion clouding his thoughts. He feels stronger, faster, more alert, like someone turned up the brightness on the world. Jesus Christ, it's real, all of it, the game system, the zombies, everything. Scott stares down at the corpse, the walker, the thing that used to be human. In his memories of the show, this was always the moment that broke people. The moment they had to accept that the rules had changed forever. But Scott has an advantage. He knows the rules, he knows what's coming. And more importantly, he has a chance to change things. New text appears in his interface. Quest available. Survive your first day. Objective: find shelter, secure supplies. Reward: 100 XP, basic supply pack. Accept. YN. Scott wipes the knife clean on the dead walker's shirt, his hands steadier now. In his original life, he died trying to save one child. Here, in this impossible place, maybe he could save dozens. Hundreds. I died for something that mattered once. Maybe I can do it again. He presses the mental equivalent of Y. Quest accepted. Waypoint marked. Pharmacy 0.6 miles. A soft blue arrow appears at the edge of his vision, pointing southeast. Scott checks the knife one more time, then moves toward the door. Outside, Atlanta burns and the dead walk, but he has knowledge they don't. He has a system they can't see. And he has a chance, maybe the only chance, to make things better this time. The interface chimes softly as he steps into the hallway, and for the first time since waking up, Scott Alen allows himself a grim smile. Game on. Chapter 2, The Empty's Instinct. Chapter 2, The Empty's Instinct. The Atlanta streets are a graveyard of abandoned cars and sporadic gunfire echoing from distant blocks. Scott moves carefully between the vehicles, the system's interface tracking his progress with cold efficiency. A minimap has appeared in the corner of his vision, showing his location as a blue dot and marking nearby threats as red blips. 3 walkers cluster around an overturned delivery truck 2 blocks north. A small group moves slowly along Peachtree Street. None of them close enough to matter. The pharmacy waypoint pulses steadily in his vision, guiding him through the maze of destruction. He's learned to trust the system's navigation. It routes him around the larger groups of walkers, keeping him in cover when possible. Just like the show, 3 days in, most people are still figuring out that you have to destroy the brain. The real nightmare hasn't started yet. A child's scream cuts through the morning air like breaking glass. Scott freezes, the EMT training that saved his life screaming at him to respond. The sound came from the direction of his waypoint, 2 blocks south, near the pharmacy district. High-pitched, desperate, the kind of terror that bypasses rational thought and goes straight to the gut. Optional objective detected. Rescue survivors in distress. Reward. Variable XP, karma bonus. Warning. High-risk encounter. I could ignore it. Keep moving. In the show, families like this die all the time. Background casualties. The math is simple. Every time I deviate from getting stronger, I risk not being able to save the people who matter later. The scream comes again, closer now. A little girl, maybe 7 years old. Scott's feet are already moving before he finishes the thought. The pharmacy sits on the corner of 2 major streets, its windows boarded up with plywood that's been partially torn away. Fresh scratches score the wood, fingernail marks from people trying to claw their way inside. Out. The screaming is coming from inside. Scott approaches from the side, using parked cars for cover. Through a gap in the boards, he can see movement, shadows shifting in the dim interior. The system's minimap updates with new information. Survivors detected. 3. Walkers detected. 6. Distance to targets. 30 meters. 6-to-1 odds. And I have to keep the family alive. He edges closer to get a better view through the gap. The family has barricaded themselves behind the pharmacy counter, a Hispanic man in his 30s, a woman who might be his wife, and a little girl with dark hair pulled into pigtails. The man's left arm is wrapped in a blood-soaked t-shirt, and from the way he's holding it, Scott can tell the wound is bad. The walkers are spread throughout the store, shambling between the aisles with mindless persistence. They haven't reached the family yet, but it's only a matter of time. Scott activates Analyze on the injured man. Martinez, Luis, bite victim. Infection status, 73% progression. Time to turn, 4 minutes 12 seconds. Amputation required within 2 minutes for survival. The blood in Scott's veins turns to ice water. In 4 minutes, Luis Martinez will become one of the things trying to kill his family. And from the medical supplies visible behind the pharmacy counter, Scott might actually be able to save him. If he moves fast enough. Scott pulls the chef's knife from his belt and checks the pharmacy's rear entrance. The lock has been broken, hanging loose on twisted metal. He slips inside, moving with the careful silence his EMT training taught him for domestic disturbance calls. The first walker doesn't see him coming. Scott drives the knife into the base of its skull, angling upward into the brain stem. It drops without a sound. Walker eliminated. Experience gained. 50 XP. The second one turns at the sound of the body hitting the floor. Scott moves faster this time, grabbing it by the hair and driving the blade through its ear canal. Efficient. Clinical. 2 down. 4 to go. Help us. The woman's voice carries desperation that makes Scott's chest tight. Please, someone help us. Maria, quiet, Luis whispers, his voice already getting slurred. The infection is moving faster than the system predicted. Scott creeps closer, using the shelving units for cover. 3 walkers cluster near the front of the store, attracted by the family's voices but unable to figure out how to get behind the counter. The 4th is closer, maybe 10 feet from the family's position. I need to get to them fast. Luis has maybe 2 minutes left. The system offers him a choice. Combat option 1, stealth approach. Success chance, 65%. Risk, moderate. Combat option 2, direct assault. Success chance, 85%. Risk, high. Combat option 3, distraction. Success chance, 40%. Risk, low. Scott chooses option 2. He bursts from cover, sprinting toward the cluster of walkers. The knife takes the nearest one in the eye socket before it can react. The other 2 turn toward him with mechanical precision, mouths opening in soundless hunger. The first one lunges. Scott sidesteps and brings the knife up under its jaw, punching through soft tissue into the brain. It collapses against a display of cough drops, sending bottles scattering. The last walker is faster than the others, maybe fresher. It catches Scott's jacket sleeve as he tries to pull back, yellowed teeth snapping inches from his throat. Scott slams his forehead into the walker's nose. Cartilage crunches, and dark fluid spatters his face. The grip loosens just enough for him to drive the knife through its temple. Multiple walkers eliminated. Experience gained, 150 XP. Skill unlock. First aid rank 1. Behind you, Maria screams. Scott spins to see the final walker rounding the counter, moving straight for the little girl. She's frozen in terror, tears streaming down her face as the thing reaches for her with decomposing fingers. Scott's throw is pure instinct and desperation. The knife tumbles end over end, catching the walker in the back of the skull. It pitches forward and goes still 3 feet from the child. Critical hit. Walker eliminated. Experience gained. 75 XP. The pharmacy falls silent except for Luis's labored breathing and Maria's quiet sobbing. Scott retrieves his knife and hurries to the family. "You're hurt," he says to Luis, switching into his professional voice. "Let me see the arm." Luis pulls away weakly. "No, it's not bad. We just need to get out of here." "Sir, I'm an EMT. Let me help." Scott gently unwraps the makeshift bandage. The bite is deep, semicircular, and already showing signs of infection around the edges. Dark veins are starting to spider out from the wound. Infection status: 91% progression. Time to turn: 47 seconds. Amputation required immediately. "Maria, I need you to hold him down," Scott says, grabbing supplies from behind the counter. Surgical scissors, gauze, alcohol, a small propane torch someone left behind. "This is going to hurt, but if I don't do this right now, he's going to die." "What are you?" "No, wait," Luis tries to protest, but his words are slurring badly now. The infection is shutting down his nervous system. Scott positions the scissors just below Luis's elbow. "I'm sorry." The amputation is brutal and fast. Luis screams once before passing out from shock. Maria holds her daughter's eyes closed as Scott works, cauterizing the wound with the heated blade of a box cutter. The smell of burning flesh mingles with the pharmacy's antiseptic scent. First aid check. Success. Patient stabilized. Amputation successful. Skill advancement. First aid rank 1, right pointing arrow rank 2. New ability unlocked. Emergency treatment. Scott wraps the stump in clean gauze, his hands steady despite the horror of what he's just done. Luis is pale and unconscious, but his breathing is regular. The dark veins around the amputation site are already starting to fade. "Is Daddy going to be okay?" The little girl's voice is barely a whisper. "He's going to live," Scott tells her, and means it. "But we need to get him somewhere safe while he recovers." Maria clutches her daughter against her chest. "Thank you. Oh God, thank you. I thought we were all going to die." Scott helps them gather supplies: antibiotics, pain medication, clean bandages. Enough to keep Luis stable while his body recovers. As they work, the little girl stays close to his side. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Scott asks. "Elena," she whispers. "Are you going to come with us?" The question hits Scott harder than he expected. In the show, families like this were footnotes, unnamed casualties who existed to show how dangerous the world had become. But Elena is real. Her fear is real. The way she trusts him despite everything is real. And Scott knows that if he stays with them, if he tries to protect them long-term, he'll never become strong enough to change the big moments. The deaths that matter to the overall story. Save who you can, when you can. But don't lose sight of the bigger picture. "I can't stay with you," Scott tells Elena gently. "But I'm going to help you get somewhere safe. There's a place called Grady Memorial Hospital. Go there, tell them you need help, and don't take no for an answer. Grady will fall eventually, but not for months. It'll give them time." He helps Maria support Luis as they plan their route. The hospital is 6 blocks away, mostly through residential areas where the walker population should be lighter. Maria has a car parked 2 blocks from here, if it's still there, if it still runs. As they prepare to leave, Elena tugs on Scott's jacket. "Will we see you again?" Scott looks down at her, 7 years old, covered in dust and tear tracks, but still hoping. Still believing that adults can make everything better. "I hope so," he says, and discovers he means it more than he expected. The system chimes softly as he watches them disappear into the broken city. Quest completed. Rescue survivors. Experience gained, 200 XP. Karma bonus, plus 50 XP. Level up, 2 right pointing arrow 3. New quest available, find sanctuary. Establish or locate a safe zone. Scott stands alone in the ruined pharmacy, knife in hand, watching Atlanta burn around him. He's saved 3 people today. In the show, they would have been statistics. Here, they have names and faces and a chance at tomorrow. The weight of that responsibility settles across his shoulders like a physical thing. Every choice he makes ripples outward, changing the story in ways he can't predict. Every life he saves is a victory, but also a reminder of all the ones he can't save. This is bigger than just surviving. I can change things, really change them. A new waypoint appears in his interface, pointing northwest toward the outskirts of the city. Toward the quarry where Rick's group will eventually make their stand. Toward the people he knows, the faces he's watched die again and again in syndicated reruns. Scott adjusts his grip on the knife and starts walking. The game has changed, and he's the only player who knows the rules. Time to start winning. Chapter 3, The Inventory Miracle. Chapter 3, The Inventory Miracle. Day 4 brings Scott to the skeletal remains of a sporting goods store, its shattered windows promising supplies if he's willing to risk the shadows inside. The building hunches against the Atlanta skyline like a wounded animal, its roof partially caved in where something heavy, a helicopter maybe, or burning debris, crashed through during the early chaos. Glass teeth rim the broken storefront, and Scott can see the dark shapes of overturned shelving units inside, creating a maze of blind corners perfect for ambush. His system pings softly with loot indicators, golden highlighting appearing around equipment visible through the gaps. Camping gear, hunting knives, a crossbow lying beneath a collapsed display rack. Scott tightens his grip on his crowbar. He's morbidly nicknamed it First Blood, after the Rambo movies his father used to watch, and checks his stats. HP, 100 100ths. Stamina, 87 100ths. Mana, 50-50. Weapons, crowbar durability, 78 100ths. The minimap in his peripheral vision shows only 2 red dots inside the store, both motionless near what used to be the fishing equipment section. Probably trapped under debris, or maybe in some kind of feeding frenzy over a corpse. 2 walkers. I can handle 2 walkers. The front entrance is too exposed, too obvious. Scott circles around to the loading dock in back, where a delivery truck sits with its rear doors hanging open like broken wings. The loading bay door is partially raised, creating a gap just wide enough for him to slip through. Inside, the store smells like dust and motor oil and something else, something sweet and cloying that makes his EMT training scream warnings about decomposition. Shafts of sunlight slant through holes in the roof, illuminating motes of dust that dance like microscopic ghosts. Scott moves carefully between the fallen shelves, his system's enhanced vision highlighting the loot scattered throughout the debris. A tactical vest here, still in its packaging. A hunting knife there, its blade catching the light. His inventory display hovers at the edge of consciousness, showing empty slots waiting to be filled. I wish I could carry more of this stuff, he thinks, reaching for a particularly nice-looking hunting knife. There's so much here, but I can only. The knife vanishes. Scott stares at his empty hand, heart hammering. The knife was there, solid, real, metal and leather and weight, and then it simply wasn't. His system interface chimes softly. Item stored in inventory, hunting knife. Inventory slots used, 1/50th. New skill discovered, dimensional storage. A new window opens in his vision, a 3-dimensional grid showing rows of empty slots, with one slot now occupied by a rotating 3D model of the hunting knife. Scott stares at it, brain struggling to process what he's seeing. That's impossible. You can't just. Matter doesn't just disappear into thin air. Conservation of mass, basic physics, what the hell is happening to me? Experimentally, he thinks about the knife, imagining it back in his hand. Blue light shimmers around his fingers, and suddenly the weight is there again, real, solid, undeniable. Item retrieved from inventory, hunting knife. The implications hit him like a physical blow. He has a portable, invisible storage dimension that defies every law of physics he understands. No weight limits, instant access, complete concealment from outside observation. I'm the ultimate scavenger. I could outfit an entire army with this ability. Scott starts grabbing everything in sight, testing the limits of his new power. The tactical vest disappears with a thought. A compound bow, a case of camping rations. Boxes of ammunition for weapons he doesn't even own yet. Each item vanishes with that same blue shimmer, materializing in his system's inventory grid. Inventory slots used, 15/50ths. Inventory slots used, 23/50ths. Inventory slots used, 34/50ths. The rush of acquisition is intoxicating. Scott finds himself laughing as he works, giddy with the power of it. No more hard choices about what to carry. No more leaving valuable supplies behind because of weight limits. He can take everything, save everything, be ready for anything. A metallic crash echoes through the store. Scott freezes, his laughter dying in his throat. The sound came from deeper inside, from the direction his minimap marked as Walker territory. But these crashes sound too deliberate, too rhythmic to be random shambling. Tap, tap, tap. Someone is trapped. Scott creeps toward the sound, using the fallen shelving for cover. His system updates the minimap as he moves, revealing more details about the store's layout. The sounds are coming from behind the sporting goods counter, where a massive shelving unit has toppled over. Help. The voice is hoarse, desperate. Male, maybe middle-aged. Scott's EMT training kicks in automatically: assess the scene, identify hazards, prioritize rescue operations. His analyze skill activates without conscious thought. Survivor detected. Male, age 45 to 50. Status: trapped, non-fatal injuries. Estimated rescue time: 3 to 4 minutes. Warning: noise level increasing. The trapped man is behind the counter, pinned under a shelf loaded with fishing equipment. He's conscious, aware, and scared out of his mind. Scott can see his legs protruding from beneath the metal frame, can hear him sobbing and calling for help. I can save him. 3 minutes, maybe 4. Just lever the shelf up, drag him out. But even as Scott starts forward, his enhanced hearing picks up other sounds. Shuffling footsteps, low moans. The red dots on his minimap are moving now, drawn by the noise of the trapped man's struggles. And there are more of them than he thought. Walkers detected. 17. Threat assessment: extreme. Recommended action: retreat. 17 walkers. A horde that was sleeping or feeding somewhere in the store's dark corners, now aroused by the commotion. Scott can see them emerging from behind overturned shelving units, shambling between aisles with single-minded purpose. The trapped man sees them too. His cries for help turn to screams. Please, someone help me, they're coming. Scott runs toward the counter, his crowbar ready. The trapped man looks up at him with desperate hope, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. Thank God, help me get this thing off. I'm trying. Scott jams the crowbar under the edge of the shelving unit and throws his weight against it. The metal groans but doesn't budge. Too heavy, too much weight pressing down. He needs better leverage, or more people, or... The first walker rounds the corner. It used to be a teenage girl, maybe 16, wearing the tattered remains of a retail uniform. Her name tag is still pinned to her shirt. Hi, I'm Ashley. The irony would be amusing if she wasn't reaching for Scott with fingers that end in blackened nails. Scott sidesteps her lunge and drives the crowbar through her temple. She drops, but her fall alerts the others. They're coming faster now, drawn by the scent of living prey. Walker eliminated. Experience gained. 50 XP. Hurry. The trapped man screams. They're coming. Scott heaves against the lever again, muscles straining. The shelf lifts maybe 6 inches before settling back down. Not enough. He needs more time, more leverage, more. Something grabs his ankle. Scott looks down to see Ashley's corpse has latched onto his leg with a death grip. Her skull is cracked open, brain matter leaking out, but her fingers are still moving, still grasping. The system's analyze function displays her status. Walker, critically damaged. Status: dying but still active. Estimated shutdown: 15 seconds. 15 seconds he doesn't have. Scott brings the crowbar down on her head repeatedly, pulverizing what's left of her skull, but precious time bleeds away with every blow. When he looks up, the horde has arrived. They pour around the corner like a living tide, men, women, children, all united in their hunger. Their moans fill the air, a sound like wind through a cemetery. Scott counts them automatically: 12, 13, 14 visible walkers with more behind them. The trapped man takes one look and makes a choice. Run. Get out of here. I'm not leaving you. I'm dead anyway. Save yourself. Scott looks from the man to the approaching horde and back again. The math is brutal and simple: he can't save them both. If he stays to fight, they'll overwhelm him. If he runs now, he might make it out alive. The first walker reaches the trapped man. Its teeth sink into his thigh, tearing through fabric and flesh. The man's scream is the sound of every nightmare Scott has ever had, raw and primal and utterly human. Go. Scott runs. He vaults over the counter and sprints toward the loading dock, the man's screams following him like a curse. Behind him, the feeding frenzy begins in earnest, wet sounds and tearing fabric and moans of satisfaction. Scott doesn't look back. He reaches the loading dock as the screams cut off, throwing himself through the gap and rolling into the sunlight beyond. His hands shake as he checks his system interface. Walkers eliminated. 3. Experience gained. 150 XP. Level up. 2 right pointing arrow 3. New stat points available, 5. Health restored, 100/100ths. The notification feels like a slap in the face. Experience points, a level up, statistical rewards for a man's death. Scott staggers into an alley between buildings and doubles over, emptying his stomach onto broken pavement. The taste of bile mingles with the memory of screams, and his whole body shakes with adrenaline crash. He's dead because I wasn't strong enough, fast enough, good enough. The system offers no comfort, no explanation for its failure to save a life. It simply displays his current stats with mechanical indifference. Level 3, Experience, 200/300ths XP to next level. Inventory slots used, 34/50ths. Scott stares at his inventory, at all the supplies he managed to grab while a man died 20 feet away. Tactical gear and weapons and camping supplies, all of it useless when it mattered most. I have all this power, all these advantages, and I still couldn't save one person. He makes his way back to his safe house as the sun sets over Atlanta's corpse, the dead man's screams echoing in his memory. That night, he sits surrounded by the supplies he managed to salvage: tactical vest, hunting knives, compound bow, enough gear to outfit a small army, and stares at his bloody hands. The system offers him power, but it can't make him fast enough, strong enough, to save everyone. He needs to be smarter. He needs to be better. And maybe, he realizes with a heavy heart, he needs to stop trying to save everyone alone. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. Writer_writer. Download app now. Chapter 4, The Crossroads Decision. Chapter 4, The Crossroads Decision. The office building becomes Scott's fortress over 2 days. Barricaded doors, supplies organized with system efficiency, a rooftop vantage point overlooking the dead city. Scott has claimed the top 3 floors of a mid-rise accounting firm, its corporate sterility now serving as sanctuary from Atlanta's decay. The building's glass facade offers commanding views of the surrounding streets while its concrete construction provides solid protection against both walkers and the elements. He's transformed 3 connected offices into functional zones using his EMT knowledge and system organization. The corner office serves as his medical station, first aid supplies arranged by priority, IV bags hanging from makeshift hooks, a surgical area sterilized with alcohol and lit by battery-powered lamps. The middle office holds his food stores, organized by expiration date and caloric content, with a small camping stove for hot meals. The third office is his sleeping area, mattresses dragged from the building's break room and arranged to block sight lines from outside. But it's the isolation that gnaws at him. Scott stands at the main window, watching the sun paint Atlanta's skyline in shades of orange and rust. Smoke rises from a dozen fires across the city, some from crashed vehicles, others from buildings that have been burning for days. In the distance, he can see the cluster of lights that marks a survivor encampment, campfires and flashlights and the warm glow of humanity refusing to surrender to the dark. The system's quest tracker pulses steadily in his peripheral vision. Active quest: find sanctuary. Objective: establish or locate a safe zone. Progress: settlement foundation established. Next step: expand infrastructure or seek allies. The new settlement interface is a marvel of tactical information. It shows the building's structural integrity 87%, lists defensive improvements he could make, tracks resource consumption and production. He could turn this place into a real fortress given enough time and materials. But fortresses are for kings with armies, and Scott is just one man with too many secrets. I could stay here, build up this place, use my system to create the perfect survival bunker. Never have to worry about hiding my abilities or explaining my knowledge. The idea has appeal. No shame to navigate around. No complex group dynamics to manage. No risk of exposure when the system chimes at the wrong moment or when his foreknowledge slips out in conversation. Just him, his growing power, and the certainty of safety. Scott activates his analyze skill and sweeps it across the distant lights. The results are fragmentary, too far for detailed information, but he can see enough to know people are out there. Families, children, survivors trying to build something from the wreckage of the world. And I'm up here playing hermit with cheat codes while they're down there struggling with basic survival. The ethical weight of his knowledge presses down like a physical thing. He knows which camps will fall, which leaders will make fatal mistakes, which children will die because their parents make the wrong choice at the wrong moment. He has the power to change those outcomes. But only if he's willing to risk everything. Movement catches his eye through the binoculars, a figure moving through the streets below with impossible grace. Scott adjusts the focus and feels his heart stop. Young Asian male, maybe early 20s, moving between abandoned cars with practiced efficiency. He carries a backpack and moves like he's done this 1,000 times before, ducking from cover to cover with the kind of skill that only comes from experience. More importantly, he moves like someone who knows the walker patterns, who understands their behavior well enough to predict and avoid them. Scott's enhanced memory supplies the details his eyes can't quite make out from this distance. Glenn Rhee, the pizza delivery boy turned master scavenger. One of the most capable survivors in the entire series, and the heart of Rick's group until the saviors bash his skull in with a baseball bat. Jesus Christ, he's just a kid. Scott tracks Glenn through the binoculars, watching him navigate the death maze of Atlanta with fluid precision. He darts between cars, avoiding walker patrols with timing that seems almost supernatural. When he reaches a pharmacy, he slips inside through a rear entrance so smoothly that Scott almost misses the movement. The implications crash over him like cold water. Glenn exists, which means the quarry camp exists. Which means Shane and Lori and Carl and Dale and all the others are out there right now, 3 days before Rick wakes up in the hospital. They're making the same mistakes, following the same patterns that led to so much death in the show. And Scott could change all of it. His hands shake as he adjusts the binoculars, trying to keep Glenn in sight. This is the first canon character he's encountered, the first face he recognizes from countless hours of television. The temptation to rush downstairs, to make contact, to start changing things is almost overwhelming. But what if I make it worse? What if my interference causes deaths that wouldn't have happened otherwise? What if knowing the story isn't enough? Glenn emerges from the pharmacy 15 minutes later, his backpack noticeably fuller. He pauses at the entrance, scanning for threats with practiced caution, then sets off toward the northern suburbs. Toward the quarry where the survivors are camped. Scott follows him. He uses fire escapes and rooftops to maintain visual contact, his system's minimap tracking Glenn's progress while highlighting potential threats. It's like watching a master class in urban survival. Glenn's route selection is flawless, his timing perfect, his instincts for danger razor sharp. He doesn't need my help. Kid's a natural, but even as he thinks it, Scott watches Glenn pause to quietly mercy kill a walker trapped under a fallen tree. The creature is pinned but still dangerous, its arms reaching and grasping at nothing. Glenn could have walked past, left it for someone else to deal with. Instead, he takes the time and risk to end its suffering with a precise thrust through the eye socket. The small act of compassion hits Scott harder than he expected. This isn't just a character from a TV show, this is a human being with genuine empathy, someone willing to show mercy even to monsters. Someone worth saving. Scott trails Glenn for another 6 blocks, using his system's analyze function to check for threats and his enhanced agility to keep pace across rooftops. He watches Glenn navigate a particularly dense walker cluster with moves that would make a parkour expert jealous, sees him pause to leave a cache of medical supplies where other survivors might find them, witnesses him risk his own safety to clear a path that other people might use later. He's good. Better than good. He's exactly the person this world needs. When Glenn stops at an intersection to check his map, Scott nearly calls out to him. The words are right there, burning in his throat. Hey. Wait, I can help. But something holds him back. Maybe it's caution, maybe it's fear, maybe it's the weight of knowing that once he makes contact, once he steps into the story, there's no going back to the safety of observation. Glenn finishes checking his route and disappears into the northern suburbs, heading toward his camp and his people in a future that Scott could change with a single conversation. Scott returns to his safe house as the sun sets, Glenn's face burning in his memory. That night, he lies on his makeshift bed and stares at the ceiling, wrestling with the biggest decision of either of his lives. The system can't tell him what choice is right. It offers no quests for moral dilemmas, no experience points for doing the right thing. The interface just glows softly in his peripheral vision, waiting for him to decide what kind of person he wants to be in this new world. Quest update. Find sanctuary. New paths available. Path 1. Establish loan settlement. Benefits. Complete security, unlimited system use. Risks. Isolation, limited growth potential. Path 2. Join survivor group. Benefits. Human connection, ability to change canon events. Risks. Exposure, complex social dynamics. Do no harm. That was the oath I took as an EMT. First, do no harm. But can he live with himself if he does nothing? Can he sit in his fortress while people die from mistakes he could prevent, from dangers he could warn them about? Glenn's face haunts his thoughts, young, determined, compassionate. In the show, he survives longer than most, becomes a leader, finds love with Maggie. But eventually, inevitably, he dies because he trusts the wrong person at the wrong moment. Unless Scott does something about it. Dawn paints the Atlanta skyline in blood red hues as Scott makes his choice. He packs his gear into his system inventory, secures the office building for a possible return, and heads for the stairs. His EMT oath whispers in his memory, "First, do no harm." But sometimes, Scott realizes, doing nothing is the greatest harm of all. The quarry camp is 14 miles away. By the time he reaches it, Rick will still be unconscious in his hospital bed, and Scott will have inserted himself into a story he once watched from the safety of his couch. There's no going back from this moment. No return to the simple safety of isolation. But maybe that's exactly what the world needs, someone willing to risk everything to save everyone. Chapter 5, First Contact. Chapter 5, First Contact. Scott tracks Glenn's supply route pattern for 3 days, learning his rhythm and danger points through system observation. The young Asian man moves like water through the urban wasteland, fluid and purposeful in a way that makes Scott's chest tight with recognition. From his perch on a fire escape 2 blocks away, Scott watches Glenn slip between abandoned cars with the kind of grace that only comes from weeks of practice dodging death. Glenn Rhee, pizza delivery boy turned master scavenger, dies because Negan wants to make a point about authority. The system's minimap tracks Glenn's progress with clinical precision, marking his position as a blue dot moving steadily toward the pharmacy district. Scott has been shadowing him for 3 days now, learning his patterns, his routes, his methods. Glenn favors speed over stealth, relies on agility over equipment, and has an almost supernatural sense for walker movements. He's also methodical in a way the TV show never really captured. Glenn checks corners twice, tests doors before opening them, and leaves himself multiple escape routes from every building he enters. The kid is good, better than good. He's a natural survivor. Which makes what Scott's about to do feel even more like interference with perfection. His system chimes softly as Glenn approaches Hutchinson's pharmacy, a mid-sized building with boarded windows and a rear entrance that's partially concealed by overgrown bushes. Alert! Walker nest detected. Hostile count, 12. Threat level, extreme. Recommended action, avoid. Scott's blood turns to ice water. The pharmacy looks safe from the outside, no broken windows, no obvious signs of infestation. But his system's analyze function penetrates the building's exterior, revealing the cluster of red dots lurking in the basement storage area. Glenn doesn't know, can't know. His enhanced hearing might pick up some shuffling, but not enough to realize what's waiting down there. Glenn pauses at the pharmacy's front entrance, head tilted as he listens for threats. For a moment, Scott thinks the young man's survival instincts will save him. But then Glenn shakes his head and moves toward the rear entrance, apparently deciding the building is safe. Scott watches him disappear inside and makes his choice. He drops from the fire escape, using his enhanced agility to absorb the impact, and sprints across the empty street. His system highlights the optimal approach route, through the adjacent alley, over a low fence, around to the pharmacy's loading dock. The sound of splintering wood carries through the morning air just as Scott reaches the rear entrance. Glenn's voice, tight with alarm, "Oh, shit. Oh shit, oh shit, oh." The unmistakable moan of walkers follows, a sound like wind through a graveyard. Scott doesn't hesitate. He crashes through the rear door of the pharmacy, his crowbar already in hand, and follows the sound of combat down a narrow staircase into the basement. The scene that greets him is chaos. Glenn stands on top of a storage rack in the center of the room, surrounded by walkers that pour from the shadows like a tide of decay. He's got a machete in one hand and a backpack in the other, but the storage rack is swaying dangerously under his weight and the impact of reaching hands. 12 walkers, just like the system predicted. Men, women, children, all wearing the tattered remnants of clothing that suggests they took shelter here when the outbreak began. Now they reach for Glenn with mindless hunger, their moans echoing off the concrete walls. "Get out of here," Glenn shouts when he sees Scott. "There's too many." Scott activates Power Strike and throws himself into the horde. Power Strike activated. Stamina, 75 100ths. Damage bonus, plus 50%. The crowbar takes the nearest walker in the skull with enough force to drop it instantly. Scott spins, using his enhanced perception to track multiple targets, and catches another in the temple. The system highlights weak points on every target, joint vulnerabilities, skull fractures, optimal strike zones. Behind you, Glenn warns. Scott ducks under grasping arms and brings the crowbar up in a vicious uppercut that punches through the third walker's jaw and into its brain. Dark fluid spatters his face, but he's already moving, already striking, the system guiding his movements with surgical precision. Walker eliminated. Walker eliminated. Walker eliminated. Experience gained. 150 XP. Jump. Scott shouts to Glenn. Now. Glenn leaps from the storage rack, landing heavily beside Scott just as more walkers press in from the shadows. They fight back to back, Glenn's machete working in short, efficient arcs while Scott's crowbar does brutal work on skulls and necks. He's good. Better than I expected. His timing is perfect, his blade work is clean. No wasted motion. But there are too many of them, and more are emerging from deeper in the basement, attracted by the noise, the scent of blood, the promise of fresh meat. We need to go. Glenn pants, blood from a walking corpse streaking his face. They'll bring more. Scott agrees with a grunt, using power strike again to clear a path toward the staircase. They fight their way up step by step, Glenn covering their retreat while Scott smashes through any walker that gets too close. They burst from the pharmacy into the late morning sunshine, both breathing hard, and don't stop running until they reach a fire escape 3 blocks away. They climb to the roof in silence, both checking for pursuit, both processing what just happened. Only when they're certain they're safe does Glenn turn to study Scott with eyes that are sharp despite his exhaustion. How did you know I was in there? Glenn asks. Scott's prepared answer suddenly feels inadequate under that direct gaze. I was scavenging nearby, heard the noise. Glenn's expression suggests he doesn't entirely buy that explanation. Scavenging what? That building's been picked clean for a week. Shit, he knows the area better than I thought. Medical supplies, Scott improvises. I'm an EMT. Always looking for medicine, bandages, that kind of thing. EMT. Glenn's expression shifts to something more interested. That's actually really useful. I'm Glenn, by the way. Glenn Ree. Scott Alen. They shake hands formally, and Scott tries not to react to the surreal experience of meeting a character he watched die on television. Glenn has a firm grip and calluses on his palm from weapon use, details the show never captured. So, Scott the EMT, Glenn continues, what were you really doing at that pharmacy? Because that timing was either incredibly lucky or what? Glenn shrugs, but his eyes stay sharp. Or you were following me. The directness of the accusation catches Scott off guard. He'd expected Glenn to be more trusting, more naive. Instead, the young man is studying him like a puzzle he's trying to solve. Why would I follow you? Supply runner recognizes supply runner, maybe. You've got gear that looks fresh, you fight like you've had practice, and your story doesn't quite add up. Glenn tilts his head, but you also just saved my life, so I'm inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt. Scott decides honesty, carefully edited honesty, might be his best option. You're right, I was watching you, not following, exactly, but observing. You're good at this, better than anyone I've seen since the world ended. I was curious how you do it. Glenn blinks, apparently not expecting that level of candor. Oh, that's actually pretty flattering. And creepy, but mostly flattering. I'm not a threat, Scott continues. I'm just trying to survive like everyone else. And I figured maybe I could learn something from watching how you operate. Learn something, huh? Glenn grins suddenly, and Scott sees a flash of the humor that made him such a beloved character. Well, lesson 1, don't go into basements without checking for nests first. Noted. Glenn studies him for another long moment, then seems to reach a decision. You saved my life in there. That counts for something, and if you're really EMT trained. He trails off, looking thoughtful. What? My camp could use someone with medical training. We've got people who know basic first aid, but nothing professional. Scott's heart pounds. This is it, the invitation he's been hoping for and dreading in equal measure. You have a camp. Group of survivors. We look out for each other, pool resources, that kind of thing. Glenn pauses. They're good people, mostly. A little paranoid about newcomers, but given what happened to the world, can you blame them? Shane will want to interrogate me. Lori will be polite but watchful. Carl will be curious. Dale will try to judge my character. And I'll have to pretend I don't know any of them. Sounds like a good setup, Scott says carefully. It is. We could use another hand, especially someone with skills. Glenn reaches into his backpack and pulls out a bottle of water, offering half to Scott. What do you say? Want to meet them? Scott accepts the water, buying time to think. This is the moment, the point of no return. Once he meets the camp, he's committed to changing their story, to interfering with events he knows will lead to both tragedy and triumph. But I can't save them from a distance. And Glenn. God, Glenn deserves better than what happens to him. I'd like that, Scott says finally. But maybe we should get to know each other a little better first. I mean, you're asking me to meet your people based on one fight. Glenn nods approvingly. Smart. Trust but verify, right? He grins. How about this, we do a few supply runs together first. See how we work as a team. If you're as good as you seem, and if you're not secretly a psychopath, maybe I introduce you to the group. Deal. As they prepare to part ways, Scott reaches into his backpack, actually his system inventory, but Glenn can't see the blue shimmer, and pulls out a bottle of antibiotics. Here, for your camp. I found these earlier. Glenn's eyes widen as he examines the medicine. Holy shit, these are exactly what Dale needs for his cough. How did you? He stops, studying Scott again. You're either the luckiest scavenger in Atlanta, or what? Glenn laughs, but it sounds slightly forced. Or you're a lot better at this than you let on. Scott maintains eye contact, keeping his expression neutral. Just good at looking in the right places, I guess. Right. Well, whatever your secret is, I hope you're willing to share it. Glenn pockets the antibiotics. Same time tomorrow. There's a medical complex on the west side that might have more supplies. I'll be here. Scott watches Glenn disappear toward the quarry camp, his system tracking the direction and updating his map with a new waypoint. Quest branching completed. Find sanctuary. Join survivor group selected. New quest. Earn trust. Objective. Complete supply runs with Glenn, 0/5. Reward. Introduction to survivor camp. Relationship tracker unlocked. Glenn Rhee. Trust 25/100. Curious stranger. Scott stares at the interface for a long moment, then at his hands. They're steady despite everything, despite meeting a character he watched die, despite taking the first step into a story he knows by heart. I've crossed the threshold now. Stepped into the story I once watched. And there's no going back. He makes his way back to his safe house as the sun reaches its zenith, Atlanta's corpse shimmering in the heat. Tomorrow he'll run supplies with Glenn Rhee. Soon he'll meet Shane and Lori and Carl and Dale and all the others. The real question, he thinks as he climbs the fire escape to his sanctuary, is whether he can save them without them discovering what he truly is. Chapter 6. The Supply Partnership. Chapter 6. The Supply Partnership. Over the next week, Scott and Glenn develop a rhythm, meeting at designated spots, coordinating supply runs with hand signals and careful planning. The abandoned coffee shop on 5th Street becomes their unofficial headquarters, its shattered windows providing excellent sight lines while its rear exit offers a quick escape route if things go wrong. Glenn arrives first each morning, checking the perimeter with practiced efficiency, while Scott approaches from a different direction to avoid establishing predictable patterns. He's methodical about this, not the impulsive kid the show sometimes portrayed. Out here, Glenn's a professional. Scott finds himself genuinely enjoying Glenn's company, his quick wit and resilient humor a welcome relief from the crushing isolation of the past week. When Glenn makes jokes about zombie movies and complains that reality doesn't match Hollywood, Scott has to bite back responses about plot armor and character development. The hardest part is hiding every system notification and ability usage. Minimap update. Walker Patrol 3 hostiles. Distance. 50 meters northeast. Scott casually suggests they take a detour around the block, claiming he heard movement from that direction. Glenn gives him a sharp look but follows his lead, and they avoid the walkers entirely. You've got good ears, Glenn observes as they approach their target, a small pharmacy tucked between a laundromat and a defunct cell phone store. EMT training. You learn to listen for sounds that don't belong. It's not entirely a lie, but it's not entirely true either. Scott's enhanced senses come courtesy of his system's passive abilities, not his medical background. Still, Glenn seems to accept the explanation, filing it away with all the other small inconsistencies he's started noticing. Because Glenn is noticing, Scott can see it in the way the young man's eyes track his movements, how he pays attention when Scott, intuitively, knows which buildings are safe and which ones hide threats. Glenn is putting together a puzzle, and Scott can only hope the final picture doesn't reveal too much. Their first close call comes on the third supply run. They're raiding a sporting goods store when Scott's attention gets pulled away by a system notification. Experience milestone reached. Level up available. New skill points. 2. Allocate now. YN. The interface hovers in his peripheral vision, demanding attention, and Scott makes the mistake of focusing on it instead of his surroundings. He doesn't notice the unstable shelving unit above him until Glenn tackles him sideways, both of them hitting the ground hard as metal and merchandise crashes down where Scott had been standing. Jesus Christ. Glenn pants, rolling off him. You okay? That thing would have caved your skull in. Scott stares at the pile of debris, camping gear and hunting equipment and a 10-foot section of industrial shelving that definitely would have killed him. The near miss leaves him shaking, not from the physical danger but from the realization that his system might be more liability than acid if he can't learn to ignore its interruptions. Thanks, Scott says, meaning it completely. I owe you one. Glenn grins, the expression transforming his face from serious scavenger to young man barely out of his teens. Buy me a pizza when this is all over and we'll call it even. In another timeline, he gets that pizza. He gets to marry Maggie and have a family and grow old. In this one, maybe I can give him the chance. Scott helps Glenn gather supplies while pushing away thoughts of baseball bats and Negan's twisted sense of justice. They work in comfortable silence, each man carrying more than his share, until Glenn breaks the quiet with an observation that makes Scott's blood run cold. You know, you're either the luckiest guy I've ever met, or you've got some kind of sixth sense for danger. Scott's hands still on the medical supplies he's packing. What do you mean? Today makes 3 times you've steered us away from trouble before we could see it. The Walker Patrol on Monday, the unstable floor in that apartment building yesterday, the pharmacy with the tripwire this morning. Glenn's voice is casual, but there's steel underneath it. Either you're psychic, or you know more about this city than you're letting on. Shit, I've been too obvious. Need to deflect without lying outright. Just paranoid, I guess. EMT work teaches you to assume everything's dangerous until proven otherwise. Glenn doesn't sound convinced. And the fact that you always seem to find exactly what we're looking for. That pharmacy yesterday had antibiotics hidden behind a false wall. How'd you know to check there? Scott's mind races. The truth is that his system's keen eye ability highlights hidden caches and secret compartments, but he can't exactly explain that to Glenn. Experience, he says finally. You learn to think like people in crisis. Pharmacists would hide the good stuff from looters, so you check for concealed spaces. Emergency responders stash supplies in non-obvious locations. Pattern recognition. Glenn considers this for a long moment, then nods slowly. Makes sense. Still seems like more than just experience, but he shrugs. Everyone's got secrets these days, right? As long as yours don't get us killed. The conversation moves on, but Scott notices Glenn watching him more carefully from that point forward. Not suspicious, exactly, but definitely evaluating. Like he's trying to figure out whether Scott is an asset worth the risk of introduction to his people. Their personal moment comes 2 days later, during a rest break in an abandoned coffee shop. They're sharing a can of peaches Scott found in his inventory, passing it back and forth while they wait for a small horde to clear out of their next target building. Can I ask you something personal? Glenn says suddenly. Scott tenses. Shoot, you ever feel like you're seeing things before they happen? Like you know what's coming next? For one terrifying moment, Scott thinks Glenn has figured him out. Then the young man continues, and Scott realizes he means something entirely different. I mean, like survivor's intuition. Some kind of sixth sense for danger. Because sometimes I swear I can feel when something's about to go wrong, you know. Like the world's trying to tell me to turn left instead of right. Relief floods through Scott so strongly he has to fight to keep it off his face. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like pattern recognition, but faster than conscious thought. Exactly. Glenn's eyes light up, like your brain is processing information you don't even know you're seeing. Micro sounds, changes in air pressure, subtle signs that something's off. They talk for another hour about survival instincts and subconscious threat assessment, and Scott finds himself sharing carefully edited versions of his experiences. Glenn opens up too, talking about missing his family, wondering if they made it to the refugee centers before the bombs fell. They were in Michigan when this started, Glenn says quietly. My parents, my sister. I keep telling myself they're too smart to get caught in the initial chaos, but you don't know, Scott finishes. And not knowing is almost worse than knowing the worst. Glenn nods, and something passes between them, A recognition of shared loss, of the weight of carrying hope when hope might be cruelty to yourself. Scott shares his own carefully constructed version of loss, using his EMT background to explain his knowledge of trauma and grief. It's not entirely a lie, he did lose people when he died in his original world. But he edits out the part about transmigration and system interfaces and knowledge of how this story is supposed to end. Sometimes I think about just walking north, Glenn admits. Finding out for sure what happened to them. But you've got people here who need you. Yeah, and maybe that's enough. Maybe family is what you choose to protect, not just what you're born into. In the show, he finds that with Maggie. But first he has to survive long enough to meet her. Their biggest breakthrough comes at the end of the week, when they successfully retrieve critical medical supplies from a veterinary clinic. Scott uses his system's keen eye ability to locate a hidden cache of antibiotics and surgical supplies, but he's careful to make the discovery seem natural, checking logical hiding spots, following EMT protocols for emergency supply storage. Glenn's eyes widen as Scott pulls bottle after bottle of medication from a concealed compartment behind the clinic's X-ray machine. Jackpot, Glenn breathes. This is exactly what Dale needs for his respiratory infection. And the surgical supplies. He trails off, studying Scott with new respect. How did you know to look there? Veterinary clinics often double as emergency human treatment centers in rural areas, Scott explains, which is true. They'd want to keep controlled substances separate from the general inventory. Right, smart. Glenn starts packing the supplies with obvious excitement. This changes everything. Dale's been getting worse, and we didn't have the meds to treat him properly. You might have just saved his life. The weight of those words hits Scott harder than expected. In the show, Dale's eventual death comes from walker attack, not respiratory illness. But here, in this slightly altered timeline, a simple infection could kill him if left untreated. Every small change ripples outward. Every life saved creates new possibilities. As they prepare to return to their respective hiding places, Glenn extends the invitation Scott has been waiting for. Listen, Glenn says, shouldering his pack. My people are going to want to meet you after this. These supplies, you just solved a major problem for us. And your medical training, he pauses, choosing his words carefully. We could use someone with your skills. EMT training, good instincts, and you're not crazy. Well, no crazier than the rest of us. Scott hesitates, and for a moment the weight of what he's about to do overwhelms him. Meeting the camp means meeting Shane, Lori, Carl, Dale, all the people he watched suffer and die. It means pretending he doesn't know their stories, doesn't know what's coming. It means becoming responsible for changing their fates. Glenn must interpret his hesitation as fear, because his voice grows reassuring. They're good people, we take care of each other. And with Rick, he stops, shaking his head. Well, we're doing okay. Better than okay, actually. We've got security, shelter, food stores. It's not perfect, but it's home. Rick, he mentioned Rick. But Rick is still in his coma, still 3 days from waking up. Unless. Rick, Scott asks carefully, our leader, he's recovering right now. Medical situation, but he's good people, you'll like him when he's back on his feet. Scott nods, filing that information away. So Rick hasn't arrived at the camp yet, which means the timeline is still roughly on track. But Glenn's phrasing suggests Rick is part of their group somehow, which is different from the show. I'd like to meet them, Scott says finally. If they'll have me. Glenn grins, the expression lighting up his entire face. They will. How could they not? You just saved Dale's life. Quest progress. Earn trust 3/5 runs completed. Glenn re. Trust 55 100ths, reliable partner. New skill unlocked. Danger sense rank 1. Passive ability. Detect threats within 10 m radius. Level up. 3 right pointing arrow 4. New stat points available. 5. That night, Scott stands at the edge of the city, staring toward the quarry's direction marked on his system map. Tomorrow he'll meet Rick's family without Rick, we'll see Dale and Andrea and all the others who'll die if he can't change things. His hands clench around his renamed crowbar, Walker Breaker MK. And he whispers to the empty night, I won't let it happen the same way. I can't. The system offers no judgment, just a new waypoint pulsing steadily in his peripheral vision. Survivor Camp 14.7 km. Scott adjusts his pack, checks his weapons one final time, and starts walking toward a future he hopes to rewrite with his own hands. Chapter 7. The Quarry Camp. Chapter 7. The Quarry Camp. The walk to the quarry takes most of the morning, Glenn filling the silence with stories about the camp's quirks and personalities. Dale's like everybody's grandfather, Glenn explains as they pick their way through a forest that's already starting to reclaim the hiking trail. He's got this ancient RV that breaks down every other week, but he keeps it running with spit and duct tape. And Shane's our unofficial leader. Former cop. He can be intense, but he keeps us alive. Scott's system pings constantly as they approach the camp, detecting multiple human signatures clustered around what his interface marks as a natural choke point. The tactical part of his mind automatically catalogs the location's advantages: high ground, clear sight lines, multiple escape routes, while his enhanced hearing picks up voices, laughter, the ordinary sounds of people trying to build something normal from apocalyptic chaos. I'm about to meet people I've mourned before they've even died. Dale's going to die saving Andrea. Amy's going to get bitten at the fish fry. Shane's going to lose his mind and try to kill Rick. And I have to pretend I don't know any of it. His stomach twists into knots as they crest the final hill and the camp comes into view. It's smaller than he expected, more intimate. Maybe 20 people scattered around a collection of tents, cars, and that iconic silver RV perched on the quarry's edge like a metallic guardian. Laundry hangs on lines strung between trees, and he can smell something cooking over an open fire: fish, maybe, or small game. It looks like hope. Fragile, temporary hope, but hope nonetheless. The first person to notice them is a man with broad shoulders and short-cropped dark hair who emerges from behind the RV with his hand resting casually on his pistol. Even at a distance, Scott recognizes the bearing, the way he moves: controlled, alert, ready for violence. Shane Walsh, future cop turned murderer, current protector of 20 innocent people. Glenn, Shane calls out, his voice carrying the authority of command. You're back early. Everything okay? Better than okay, Glenn responds, raising his hand in greeting. Found someone you're going to want to meet. The camp stirs to life as people emerge from tents and gather around the fire. Scott's system helpfully begins identifying faces, overlaying names and basic information like some sort of morbid social media feed. Shane Walsh, male, age 38. Relationship: unestablished. Threat assessment: moderate to high. Psychological profile: authority figure, stress indicators present. Shane approaches with measured steps, his eyes never leaving Scott's face. When he's close enough to speak without raising his voice, he stops and crosses his arms. I'm Shane Walsh. This is my camp. The emphasis on possession is subtle but unmistakable. Scott recognizes the territorial display for what it is, a test to see how he'll respond to authority. Scott Alen, he responds, keeping his voice level and non-threatening. Glenn invited me to meet your people. That's so. Shane's gaze flicks to Glenn, who nods enthusiastically. Guy's an EMT, Shane. Saved my ass from a walker nest yesterday, and he's got medical supplies the camp can use. Shane's expression shifts slightly at the mention of medical training. EMT, huh. You current. Was when the world ended. 5 years with Atlanta Fire Department. Shane studies him for a long moment, then jerks his head toward the camp. Let's talk. The weapons check is thorough but professional. Shane examines Scott's crowbar, the hunting knife from his inventory, and the small collection of basic supplies he's carrying in his backpack. When Shane asks about his medical training, Scott provides his EMT certification number from memory and answers questions about emergency procedures with the kind of detail that comes from real experience. Airway, breathing, circulation, Scott recites when Shane asks about trauma assessment. Control bleeding, treat for shock, immobilize spinal injuries if possible. Priority is keeping the patient alive long enough to reach definitive care, though I suppose that's less relevant now. Shane grunts approval. Sounds right. We could use someone with real training. He hands the weapons back. Glenn vouches for you, and we need medical help. But understand something, I keep these people safe. All of them. You cause problems, you're gone. We clear. Crystal. The introduction to the rest of the camp flows more smoothly after Shane's endorsement. A woman with shoulder-length brown hair and tired eyes approaches first, a boy maybe 12 years old hanging close to her side. Lori Grimes, female, age 35. Psychological profile: protective maternal instincts, guilt markers present. Carl Grimes, male, age 12. Relationship to Lori: son. Rick's family: his wife and son. God, they have no idea what's coming. The reunion, the jealousy, everything Shane's going to put them through. I'm Lori, she says, offering her hand. This is my son Carl. Glenn mentioned you have medical training. That's right. EMT background. Relief flashes across her face. Thank God. We've been making do with basic first aid, but... She glances at Carl, and Scott catches the unspoken worry. Children are vulnerable in ways adults can't always protect them from. Carl stares up at Scott with the kind of unguarded curiosity only kids can manage. Are you a doctor? Not exactly, but I know how to help people when they're hurt. Cool, Carl says with the simple acceptance of childhood. Shane says I can't learn to shoot until I'm older, but maybe you can teach me other stuff. Carl, Lori chides gently, but Scott can see she's not entirely opposed to the idea. I'd be happy to teach you basic first aid, Scott tells the boy. Every survivor should know how to treat injuries. From his inventory, carefully shielded from view by his backpack, Scott pulls out a bag of hard candy he'd stored from an earlier scavenging run. For being patient while the adults talk, he tells Carl, offering the candy. Carl's face lights up, and Lori mouths, "Thank you," over his head. It's a small gesture, but Scott knows it'll pay dividends in group acceptance. The next introduction comes from an elderly man with silver hair and kind eyes who approaches carrying a steaming mug. Dale Horvath, male, age 65. Psychological profile. Elder figure, high empathy, moral compass. I'm Dale, the old man says, offering Scott the mug. Coffee's not real coffee, but it's warm and caffeinated. Scott accepts the drink gratefully, noting the way Dale's handshake lingers just a moment longer than necessary, assessing, measuring, forming judgments about character. This kind man dies trying to save Andrea from a walker. Gutted in the dark because he went out alone to think. I can't let that happen. Thank you, Scott says, and means it. Glenn mentioned you've been having some respiratory issues. Dale's eyebrows rise. Nothing serious, just a persistent cough. Getting older isn't for the weak, especially these days. From his inventory, Scott produces a bottle of antibiotics, the same ones Glenn had been so excited about finding. These should help clear that up. Take one twice a day with food. Dale stares at the medicine bottle like it's a miracle. How did you? Supply run earlier this week. Figured someone in camp could use them. This is. Dale's voice catches slightly. This is exactly what I needed. Thank you. The gratitude in the old man's voice makes Scott's chest tight. Such a small thing, antibiotics that cost him nothing from his system inventory, but it means health and comfort for someone who's become a grandfather figure to 20 survivors. The introductions continue in a blur of faces and names. Two women approach together, sisters, obviously, despite the difference in their demeanor. Andrea, female, age 32. Amy, female, age 22. Relationship, sisters. Andrea is all sharp angles and barely contained energy, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and her eyes constantly scanning for threats. Amy is softer, younger, with a brightness that hasn't been completely worn away by the apocalypse. Amy dies first, gets bitten during the fish fry attack. Andrea has to shoot her own sister to keep her from turning. Jesus Christ, how am I supposed to make small talk knowing that? I'm Andrea, the older sister says, her handshake firm and evaluating. This is Amy. Nice to meet you both. Amy smiles with genuine warmth. Glenn told us you saved his life. Thank you for bringing him back safe. Glenn saved himself. I just provided backup. Still, Amy insists. We look out for each other here. Anyone who helps one of us helps all of us. Andrea's expression remains more guarded, but she nods agreement. We appreciate it. The next introduction comes with immediate tension. A man in his 40s with thinning hair and the soft look of someone who's never missed a meal approaches with obvious reluctance. Ed Peletier, male, age 45. Psychological profile. Abusive personality, control issues. Warning. Domestic violence indicators. Behind him, hanging back like a shadow, is a woman with graying hair and downcast eyes that scream volumes about her home life. Carol Peletier, female, age 40. Psychological profile. Abuse victim, extreme submission patterns. Ed's a wife-beating piece of shit who dies early. Carol becomes one of the most dangerous people in the group after he's gone. From victim to stone-cold killer. Amazing what people are capable of when they're finally free. Another mouth to feed, Ed mutters, just loud enough to be heard. Hope you're bringing more than you're taking. The casual dismissal hits Scott like a slap, not because of the content but because of what it represents. This is exactly the kind of petty power play that abusers use, diminishing newcomers to maintain their position in the hierarchy. Ed, Carol says quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, he didn't mean. Yes, I did mean it. Ed cuts her off with the kind of casual cruelty that makes Scott's EMT training scream warnings about domestic violence. Resources are tight. Everyone needs to pull their weight. Scott forces his voice to remain level. I'm an EMT. I'm carrying medical supplies the group can use. And Glenn can tell you I handle myself in a crisis. Ed grunts, apparently unsatisfied but unwilling to push further with Shane watching. Carol glances up at Scott for just a moment, and he sees bruises on her wrists that she's tried to cover with long sleeves. The sight makes his jaw clench. Thank you, she whispers. For the medicine, for helping Glenn. Her gratitude is almost painful in its intensity, like she's not used to people being kind to her. Scott nods, filing away the abuse patterns for future reference. In the show, Ed's death was almost a relief. Here, seeing Carol's fear firsthand, Scott finds himself hoping it comes sooner rather than later. Two men working on a car nearby pause their conversation to wave. Scott recognizes them from the show, T-Dog and Morales, two of the more pragmatic survivors who never got enough screen time. T-Dog, male, age 29. Morales, Louis, male, age 34. Before Scott can approach them, a commotion breaks out near one of the tents. A child's cry cuts through the camp's normal background noise, and Scott's EMT training kicks in automatically. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, is crying in the arms of a Hispanic woman while a man, presumably her father, paces nearby with obvious anxiety. What's wrong? Scott asks, approaching with the kind of calm authority that comes from years of emergency response. She's burning up, the woman says, her accent thick with worry. Started this morning. I don't know what to do. Scott activates his analyze skill while kneeling beside the child. Sophia Morales, female, age 4. Status, fever 101.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Cause, dehydration, heat stress. Treatment, fluids, cooling measures. Prognosis, excellent with basic care. May I examine her? Scott asks the parents. When they nod desperately, he begins a gentle assessment, checking temperature, looking at her eyes, palpating her neck for swollen lymph nodes. It's heat stress and dehydration, Scott tells them after a moment. Nothing serious, but we need to get her cooled down and get fluids in her. He guides them through the treatment, moving the child to shade, removing excess clothing, giving her small sips of cool water. Within 20 minutes, her fever breaks and she's sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. Gracias, the woman whispers, tears of relief streaking her cheeks. Gracias, señor. Morales grips Scott's shoulder. Thank you. We didn't know, we thought. She's going to be fine, Scott assures him. Kids dehydrate faster than adults, especially in this heat. Just keep pushing fluids and keep her in the shade. The crowd that gathered during the medical emergency disperses with obvious relief, but Scott notices the way people look at him now. Not as a stranger Glenn brought back, but as someone useful. Someone who can solve problems. Dale appears at Scott's elbow as he's washing his hands with precious water from a camp jug. That was well done, the old man says quietly. Professional. Just doing what I was trained to do. Dale's eyes are knowing. Glenn mentioned you have good instincts for finding supplies. And I noticed the way you assessed the camp's layout when you arrived. That's not typical EMT behavior. Shit, Dale's too observant. I need to be more careful. Paranoia, Scott says with a self-deprecating smile. Apocalypse makes you notice things like escape routes and defensive positions. Dale chuckles. Indeed it does. Still, you have a tactical mind. Emergency response work will teach you that, I suppose. Before Scott can respond, Glenn appears with a plate of food and an enormous grin. Told you they're good people, he says, settling down beside the fire. Though I'm guessing Ed wasn't exactly welcoming. Ed's an ass, says a gravelly voice from across the fire. Scott looks up to see two men approaching, brothers, obviously, despite their different builds. The shorter one is lean and compact, with long dirty blonde hair and the kind of weathered face that comes from years of hard living. The taller one is broader, more muscular, with a shaved head and a collection of scars that suggest a violent past. Daryl Dixon, male, age 35. Merle Dixon, male, age 43. Relationship. Brothers. Warning. Merle classified as potential threat. The Dixon brothers. Daryl becomes one of the most loyal people in Rick's group. Merle's complicated, racist, violent, unstable. But he loves his brother, and that might be enough to work with. Daryl nods at Scott with neutral acknowledgement while cleaning a crossbow that looks like it's seen serious use. Merle's assessment is more obvious, looking Scott up and down like he's evaluating livestock. Well, Merle drawls. Another pretty boy joins the camp. Hope you're tougher than you look, sunshine. The casual insult is delivered with a grin that doesn't reach his eyes. It's a test, Scott realizes. Push back too hard and Merle will escalate, back down too much and he'll see weakness. Tough enough, Scott responds mildly, maintaining eye contact without being aggressive about it. Merle's grin widens. We'll see about that. Before the tension can escalate, Shane's voice cuts across the camp. Merle, knock it off. Man just helped save a little girl's life. Show some respect. Merle raises his hands in mock surrender, but Scott notices the way his eyes narrow when Shane's not looking. Another person to watch carefully. Daryl, meanwhile, continues cleaning his crossbow with the kind of methodical attention that suggests genuine expertise. When he speaks, his voice is quieter than his brother's but carries its own weight. Crossbow's good for hunting, he says without looking up. Quiet, reusable ammo. Don't attract every walker in a mile radius like gunfire. It's not quite conversation, but it's not hostility either. Scott files it away as potential common ground. As the afternoon wears on, Scott settles into the camp's rhythm. He helps with small tasks, organizing medical supplies, assisting with food preparation, offering quiet advice about camp security that he frames as EMT emergency planning protocols. People begin to relax around him. Carl asks a dozen questions about first aid and emergency response. Amy shares stories about her college experiences. Even Andrea engages him in conversation about survival tactics, though her questions are more probing than casual. She's smart, perceptive. I need to be careful not to reveal too much. As sunset approaches and the camp gathers around the fire for dinner, Scott finds himself studying faces in the flickering light. These aren't characters from a TV show anymore, they're real people with hopes and fears and complicated inner lives. Dale's dry humor, Amy's infectious laughter, Carl's boundless curiosity. People he's going to have to watch die unless he can figure out how to change their story. Glenn catches his eye across the fire and winks. Told you they're good people, he mouths silently. Scott manages a real smile despite the weight in his chest. They are good people, flawed, human, dealing with impossible circumstances as best they can. They deserve better than what's coming. His system chimes softly, displaying updates he's been expecting. Settlement, quarry camp, resident status achieved. Multiple relationship trackers initialized. Shane Walsh, wary 3100ths. Lori Grimes, grateful 4100ths. Dale Horvath, friendly 6100ths. Andrea, neutral 35/100ths. Daryl Dixon, suspicious 2100ths. Carol Peletier, hopeful 45/100ths. New quest, earn camp's trust. Objective, complete helpful tasks 0/10ths. The easy part is over, Scott realizes as conversation flows around him and people begin to relax into evening routines. Now comes the hard part, keeping them alive without them discovering he knows exactly how they're supposed to die. But as he watches Carl help his mother clean dishes, as he listens to Dale tell stories about the old days, as he sees Amy brush Andrea's hair in a moment of sisterly intimacy, Scott feels something he hasn't experienced since waking up in this world. Purpose. These people are worth saving. All of them, even Ed, despite his flaws. Even Merle, despite his ugliness. The system offers him power, knowledge, advantages beyond anything they could imagine. But it can't tell him how to be human, how to build trust, how to love people enough to risk everything for them. That part, he's going to have to figure out himself. Chapter 8. The Secret Reinforcement. Chapter 8. The Secret Reinforcement. Scott's first days at camp fall into a careful rhythm, helping with camp chores, treating minor injuries, and subtly observing security weaknesses his system highlights in red. The interface has become his constant companion, overlaying tactical information on the ordinary activities of camp life. As he helps Amy gather firewood, his vision shows optimal defensive positions. When he assists Dale with RV maintenance, the system marks structural vulnerabilities and potential improvements. During watch duty, threat assessment protocols run automatically, cataloging every shadow that might hide a walker. It's like living with a computer in my brain. Useful, but exhausting. Every conversation is filtered through data streams and probability calculations. At night, when the camp settles into sleep, Scott uses his insomnia as an excuse to make improvements that seem like common sense but are actually guided by his interface's tactical analysis. The first change is subtle, suggesting they move Dale's RV 15 feet to the left during their morning discussion about camp layout. Better sight lines down the main approach, Scott explains when Dale asks why. EMT training includes a lot of tactical thinking about scene safety and evacuation routes. Dale studies the new position thoughtfully. You're right, I can see the whole valley from here now. Good eye. What Scott doesn't mention is that his systems analysis showed the original position created a blind spot that walkers could use to approach unseen. The new location also provides cover from small arms fire and a clear escape route toward the forest if the camp is overrun. Settlement upgrade. Observation post optimized. Camp security rating, +5. The second improvement comes during a conversation with Glenn about supply runs. Scott mentions offhandedly that he noticed some wire and tin cans in the camp's junk pile. Noise traps, Scott explains when Glenn looks puzzled. Something I read in a survival manual. String cans on wire around the camp perimeter. Walkers stumble through them, cans make noise, gives us early warning. Glenn's eyes light up. That's actually brilliant, low-tech, but effective. They spend the next evening setting up the perimeter, stringing fishing line between trees and hanging empty cans at intervals that will create maximum noise with minimal false alarms. Other camp members help, and Scott notices the way working together builds group cohesion. Settlement upgrade. Early warning system installed. Camp security rating, +8. Shane watches the installation with sharp eyes, occasionally offering suggestions but mostly observing Scott's tactical thinking. You seem to know your way around defensive positions, Shane comments as they test the noise trap placement. EMT work teaches you to think about scene safety, Scott responds with what's becoming his standard deflection. How to position vehicles for protection, where to stage equipment for quick access, how to plan evacuation routes. Same principles apply here. Shane nods slowly, but Scott catches the way his eyes narrow slightly. The future cop is putting pieces together, noting the inconsistencies between what Scott claims and what he demonstrates. I need to be more careful. Shane's too smart to buy the just EMT training excuse much longer. The third improvement is the most significant, reorganizing the watch schedule. Scott frames it as a suggestion during a camp meeting, using his EMT background to explain the importance of fatigue management. 12-hour shifts are too long, he argues when Shane presents the current rotation. People get tired, make mistakes. 6-hour watches with overlapping coverage gives better security with less individual strain. The discussion that follows reveals the depth of Scott's tactical knowledge despite his attempts to downplay it. He talks about sightline coverage, shift transition protocols, and backup procedures with the kind of expertise that comes from more than medical training. Dale listens with obvious interest. You've given this a lot of thought. It's just common sense, Scott deflects. But yeah, I've had time to observe what works and what doesn't. Shane's final approval comes with a caveat, good ideas. I'll implement them starting tomorrow. But I'm curious, where'd an EMT learn so much about perimeter security? You pick things up, Scott says carefully. Emergency services work with police and military on disaster response. You absorb tactics. It's not entirely a lie, but it's not entirely the truth either. Shane studies him for a long moment before nodding acceptance. Settlement upgrade. Optimized watch rotation. Camp security rating, +15. Quarry camp. Level 1 right pointing arrow level 2. The supply run improvements are where Scott's system truly shines, though he has to be increasingly careful about appearing too lucky. On their third run together, Glenn leads them to a pharmacy they'd hit before, looking for anything they might have missed. Scott's keen eye ability immediately highlights a false wall behind the prescription counter. Check that panel, Scott suggests casually. Looks like it might be hiding something. Glenn pries at the wall and discovers a hidden compartment filled with antibiotics and controlled substances. His eyes widen as he catalogs the find. How did you know to look there? Scott shrugs. Pharmacists would hide the good stuff from looters. Standard emergency protocols, secure valuable supplies in non-obvious locations. Inventory gained, medical supplies x15. Experience gained, 100 XP. But Glenn's growing suspicion becomes obvious on their fifth run when Scott guides them away from a building he claims looks unstable, but which the system marks as containing a walker horde. You've got incredible instincts, Glenn observes as they watch the building from a safe distance. Like you can sense danger before it appears. Paranoia, Scott deflects. Better to assume everything's dangerous and be wrong than the other way around. Maybe. Or maybe you're just really good at reading signs the rest of us miss. The conversation is interrupted by a commotion from inside the unstable building, the sound of walkers moving around, confirming Scott's warning is legitimate. Glenn gives him a look that's part gratitude, part suspicion. Lucky guess, Scott says, but he can tell Glenn's not buying it anymore. Glenn trust 7100ths. Warning. Pattern recognition threshold approaching. The confrontation Scott's been dreading comes during his second week at camp. Shane corners him during the night watch, appearing out of the darkness with the quiet confidence of someone who knows how to move unseen. Can't sleep? Shane asks, settling down beside Scott at the camp's edge. Too much on my mind. Yeah, I know that feeling. Shane's voice is casual, but Scott can hear the probing underneath. Been thinking about you, actually. Here it comes. The interrogation I've been expecting. That's so. You're an interesting guy, Scott. Good in a crisis, smart about tactics, lucky as hell with supply runs. Shane pauses. Almost too lucky. Scott keeps his expression neutral. Just thorough. EMT work teaches you to be systematic. Shane's tone suggests he's heard this explanation before and isn't buying it. See, I've worked with EMTs. Good people, trained professionals. But your level of tactical thinking, that's more than emergency medical training. The silence stretches between them, filled with the sounds of night, distant walker moans, the rustle of wind through trees, the quiet breathing of 20 people trying to sleep safely for another night. You've got training, Shane continues. More than EMT stuff. Military, cop work. Scott considers his options. Stick to his cover story and risk Shane's growing suspicion, or reveal partial truths that might satisfy his curiosity. Army Reserve, Scott lies smoothly. Did some training with the National Guard. That's where I picked up the tactical stuff. It's a calculated risk. Shane can't verify military records in the apocalypse, and it explains Scott's knowledge without revealing too much. Shane nods slowly. That makes more sense. Why didn't you mention it before? Didn't seem relevant. It was just weekend warrior stuff, not active duty. Right. Shane's voice carries a note of satisfaction, like he's solved a puzzle. Well, that explains a lot. Good to know we've got someone with real training. He's buying it, for now, but as Shane starts to stand, he pauses and looks back at Scott with an expression that makes Scott's blood run cold. Just remember something, Shane says, his voice dropping to a lower register. I'm keeping everyone here safe. All of them. Whatever your story is, the whole truth or just what you're willing to share, don't make me regret letting you stay. The threat is subtle but unmistakable. Shane's not entirely convinced by the cover story, and he's making it clear that Scott's continued presence depends on his good behavior. Understood, Scott responds, meeting Shane's gaze directly. Shane nods and disappears back into the darkness, leaving Scott alone with his racing thoughts. Shane Walsh. Suspicious 25/100ths. Warning. Relationship deteriorating. Optional quest available. Improve relations with Shane. I've made an enemy of the future antagonist earlier than planned. Shane's paranoia is accelerating, probably because Rick hasn't arrived yet to focus his jealousy. This is bad. Scott spends the rest of his watch analyzing the conversation and its implications. Shane's suspicion isn't just professional paranoia, it's personal. He sees Scott as a potential threat to his leadership, his authority, maybe even his relationship with Lori and Carl. In the show, Shane's breakdown was triggered by Rick's return and the challenge to his alpha status. Here, without Rick's presence, Shane's focusing that same territorial instinct on Scott. I need to be more careful. Less perfect. Shane's looking for reasons to distrust me, and I've been giving him plenty. The next morning brings an opportunity to test that theory. During breakfast, Carl asks Scott about his military training, apparently having overheard the conversation with Shane. Were you a soldier? The boy asks with wide-eyed curiosity. Scott sees Shane watching the interaction from across the camp and makes a deliberate choice. Just reserves, Scott says, fumbling with his coffee cup and spilling a bit on his shirt. Weekend training, mostly, nothing like the real thing. It's a small show of human fallibility, but Scott notices Shane's expression relax slightly. Too much competence makes people suspicious. A little clumsiness makes you seem human. Over the following days, Scott deliberately makes small mistakes. He burns dinner one night while helping Carol cook. He trips over tent stakes and apologizes sheepishly. During a supply run with Glenn, he misses an obvious cache of supplies, letting Glenn find it instead. Relationship management active. Glenn Rhee, trust 75/100ths. Dale Horvath, trust 70/100ths. Shane Walsh, suspicious 30/100ths plus 5. It's a delicate balance, competent enough to be useful, human enough to be trusted, fallible enough to avoid suspicion. Scott finds himself walking a tightrope between revealing too much and not contributing enough. The camp's improvements continue despite his more careful approach. The security upgrades make everyone feel safer, and the improved supply acquisition keeps morale high. But Scott knows he's still being watched, evaluated, judged. That evening, as he lies in his tent listening to the camp's nighttime sounds, Scott reflects on the complexity of human relationships in survival situations. His system can analyze threats and optimize tactics, but it can't account for jealousy, paranoia, and the subtle dynamics of group politics. Carl's quiet breathing comes from the nearby tent, along with the murmur of Lori and Shane having a hushed conversation about watch schedules. Further away, Dale snores softly in his RV while someone, probably Daryl, moves quietly through the camp on patrol. Settlement status: Quarry Camp, Level 2. Security rating: 45/100ths. Morale: 72/100ths. Population: 21 survivors. The statistics are encouraging, but Scott knows numbers can't account for human unpredictability. Shane's suspicion is a problem that could escalate quickly, especially if, when, Rick arrives and the camp's power dynamics shift dramatically. I can't afford to seem too perfect. Sometimes the best way to hide exceptional abilities is to fail convincingly at the small things. Scott stares at the tent ceiling and makes a mental note: tomorrow he'll make sure to burn breakfast again. A little human fallibility might be exactly what he needs to survive the complex social dynamics of people trying to rebuild civilization from the ashes of the old world. Outside, a walker moans in the distance, a lonely, hungry sound that reminds everyone that no matter how safe they feel, the real threats are still out there waiting. Chapter 9. The Brothers Dixon. Chapter 9. The Brothers Dixon. Pav. Daryl Dixon. Daryl spits tobacco juice and checks his crossbow string for the third time this morning. The EMT city boy volunteers for hunting, which means either Scott's got balls or he's stupid. Probably both. Ain't gonna be no picnic out there, Daryl grunts, shouldering his pack. You sure you can keep up? Scott nods, hefting his crowbar. Kid's got decent gear, hunting knife, sturdy boots, knows enough to wear earth tones. Might not be completely hopeless. Merle snorts from behind them. Look at teacher's pet, all eager to play outdoorsman. Bet he's never seen blood that didn't come from some candy-ass accident. Shut up, Merle, Daryl mutters, but his brother's already warming to the theme. What do you think, little brother? City boy gonna cry first time he gets deer guts on his pretty hands. Scott stays quiet, which is smart. Merle's looking for a reaction, and backing down won't satisfy him, but neither will fighting. Kid seems to understand the game. They move into the woods, Daryl taking point automatically. Behind him, Scott follows without complaint, keeping noise to minimum. That's something, at least. Most of these camp folks stomp through the forest like they're announcing themselves to every walker in Georgia. The trail's 3 hours old, white-tailed doe by the size of the tracks. Daryl reads the signs like words on a page: broken twig here, disturbed leaves there, the faint musk scent leading deeper into the forest. How do you know it went this way? Scott asks quietly. Daryl pauses, surprised by the genuine interest. Most people don't want to learn, just want him to provide meat and shut up about it. Tracks pressed deep here, Daryl explains, pointing to an indentation in the soft earth. Front hooves dug in, means it was moving fast. Probably spooked by something. And see this, he indicates a broken branch at shoulder height. Deer trail, they use the same paths over and over. Scott nods, studying the sign. Makes sense. Animals are creatures of habit. Just like people, Daryl agrees. The boy actually listens, doesn't act like he already knows everything. That's rare. Merle crashes through the underbrush behind them. Y'all gonna stand around jawing all day, or we gonna kill something? Pav. Scott. They track the deer for 2 more miles, Daryl teaching and Scott learning. The hunter knows these woods like a man knows his own living room, reading stories in bent grass and scratched bark. Skill progression. Tracking plus 15%. Daryl Dixon. Trust plus 10. Scott ignores the system notifications, focusing on Daryl's instruction. This is real skill, earned knowledge that doesn't come from interface upgrades. The kind of competence that matters when technology fails. There, Daryl whispers, raising his crossbow. The doe stands 50 yards ahead, head down, grazing in a small clearing. Beautiful animal, alert but unaware. Daryl's breathing slows, steadies. His finger finds the trigger. The bolt takes the deer clean through the heart. It drops without suffering. Daryl's shot precise and merciful. Professional work. Nice shooting, Scott says, and means it. Daryl just grunts, but Scott catches the flash of satisfaction. Compliments are rare for the prickly hunter. Pav. Merle Dixon. Merle watches his little brother skin the deer, noting how the EMT boy doesn't flinch from blood and bone. Kid's got steady hands, knows his way around a blade. Military maybe, or just grew up rough. You done this before, Merle observes, not making it a question. Scott looks up from the carcass. Some EMT work, you see plenty of trauma. And my dad hunted when I was young. Truth and lies mixed together, Merle thinks. Kid's hiding something, but then again, everyone's hiding something these days. Question is whether it matters. Where'd you grow up? Merle presses. Rural Alabama. Small town, nothing special. Could be true, could be bullshit. Scott's hands work efficiently, sectioning meat with practiced skill. Merle spent enough time around con men and liars to recognize the signs, but this boy's different. Not trying to sell anything, just trying to fit in. Alabama, huh, what part? Scott pauses just a fraction too long. Near Birmingham, like I said, nothing special. Definitely hiding something, but Merle finds he doesn't much care. Boy saved Daryl from those walkers in the pharmacy, risked his own neck for someone he barely knew. That counts for more than whatever secrets he's carrying. Well, city boy, Merle says, offering a rare grin without menace, you ain't completely useless. Pav. Daryl Dixon. On the way back, Scott suggests they take the long way around a ridge instead of cutting straight across. Looks unstable, he explains, pointing to loose scree and recent erosion. Merle bristles immediately. I've been hunting these woods since before you could wipe your own ass, boy. Don't need some city EMT telling me. Merle, Daryl cuts him off. Kid's got a point. That slope's been washing out since the heavy rains. But his brother's already worked up, the familiar anger that comes when anyone questions his judgment. Merle shoves Scott hard enough to stagger him. Know-it-all pussy, Merle snarls. Think you're better than us, with your fancy medical training and… Daryl steps between them before it escalates. Enough. He's making you soft, Merle accuses. Whole damn camp's making you soft. We don't belong with these people, little brother. Scott's all right, Daryl says firmly. He listens, shows respect. Merle's face goes ugly. Since when you care about respect from city folks? They look down on us, Daryl. Always have, always will. Not him, Daryl insists, and realizes he means it. Scott treats him like his opinions matter, asks real questions instead of just tolerating him until he provides meat for the pot. You're pussy whipped by the whole lot of 'em, Merle spits. And you're being an ass. The words hang in the air between them. Merle's eyes narrow dangerously, but something in Daryl's stance, protective, determined, makes him back down. Fine, Merle says finally. But when they turn on us, and they will, don't come crying to me. He stalks off ahead, leaving Daryl and Scott alone on the trail. Sorry about that, Daryl mutters. Merle's complicated. Family usually is, Scott says quietly. Daryl glances at him, noting the understanding in the younger man's voice. Maybe Scott knows something about complicated families too. They walk in comfortable silence until camp comes into view, the smell of wood smoke and the sound of voices carrying through the trees. Home, such as it is. Pav. Scott. That night, Daryl settles beside Scott at the fire, accepting his portion of venison with a grunt of satisfaction. You're all right, Daryl says quietly. For a city boy. High praise from the taciturn hunter. Scott feels the weight of genuine friendship forming, something that transcends system mechanics and relationship counters. Daryl Dixon. Respected friend 65 100ths. New quest unlocked. The Dixon situation. Merle Dixon. Hostile tolerance 15 100ths. Across the fire, Shane watches their interaction with calculating eyes. Every ally Scott makes is another perceived threat to Shane's authority, another complication in the delicate balance of camp politics. The game's getting more complex. But for the first time since arriving at camp, Scott has a real friend watching his back. Chapter 10. The First Attack. Chapter 10. The First Attack. Pav. Carl Grimes. Carl wakes to screaming. For a confused moment, still caught between sleep and waking, he thinks it's a nightmare. But the terror in his mother's voice is too real, too immediate. Carl, get to the RV. Now. He stumbles from the tent in his pajamas, bare feet hitting cold ground. The camp's on fire with chaos, people running, shouting, something moving in the darkness beyond the fire's light. Walkers. At least a dozen of them, shambling into camp like a tide of death. Pav. Shane Walsh. Shane's up and moving before he's fully awake, training and instinct taking over. Pistol in hand, safety off, brain cataloging threats and priorities with mechanical efficiency. Form up on me, he shouts, trying to establish a defensive line. Don't let them scatter us. But it's too late for organized defense. The walkers are already in among the tents, people fleeing in all directions. Shane spots 3 of the bastards heading for the kids and sprints to intercept. His first shot takes the nearest walker in the head, dropping it instantly. The second shot goes wide in the chaos, and Shane has to close distance, using his pistol like a club to cave in another walker's skull. Dale, get the kids to the RV. Pav. Dale Horvath. Dale's old hands shake as he fumbles with the RV's keys, trying to get the door open while Carl and Sophia press against his legs in terror. The diesel engine cranks once, twice, finally catches. Inside, children, quickly now. Amy appears at his elbow, her face pale but determined. I'll help watch them. Good girl. Dale's heart hammers against his ribs, but he keeps his voice calm for the children. It's going to be all right. Just stay low and quiet. Through the RV's windows, he watches Scott appear from nowhere, crowbar in hand, positioning himself between a walker and Carl's tent. The young EMT moves with deadly purpose, dropping walkers with efficient precision. Pav. Scott. Walker horde detected. 15 hostiles. Camp population. 21 survivors. Defensive positions. Poor. Scott's system paints the battlefield in tactical overlays, but training and instinct matter more than interface data. He spots Carl's abandoned tent, a walker reaching for the fabric, and closes distance fast. Power strike activated. The crowbar punches through the walker's skull with wet finality. Scott spins, looking for the next threat, and sees Ed Pelletier 20 feet away. The abusive husband is down, 3 walkers tearing into him while Carol screams for help. Scott's system displays cold mathematics. Ed Pelletier, critically injured 95% mortality. Carol Pelletier, in danger 70% survival rate. Estimated time to choose, 3 seconds. Scott chooses Carol. Pav. Carol Pelletier. The world dissolves into nightmare. Ed screaming, walkers everywhere, teeth and blood and the smell of death. Carol runs without thinking, pure panic driving her feet. Strong hands grab her shoulders, pull her away from grasping fingers. I've got you, Scott's voice, calm despite the chaos. Stay behind me. He moves like violence personified, the crowbar becoming an extension of his will. Walker after walker falls, and Carol huddles behind him, watching her husband die 20 feet away. She should feel guilty for not trying to save Ed. Should feel something other than relief. Pav. Andrea. Andrea emerges from her tent with the shotgun Shane gave her, heart hammering but hands steady. Amy's safe in the RV with the kids, that's what matters. She spots a walker stumbling toward Dale's position and fires. The blast takes off most of its head, painting the RV's side with gore. Nice shot, T-Dog calls out, wrestling with a walker near the fire pit. Andrea racks another shell, looking for targets. This is what she's been training for, preparing for. No more helplessness, no more watching others fight her battles. Pav. Daryl Dixon. Daryl puts a bolt through a walker's eye, smoothly reloads, acquires the next target. Crossbow work in close quarters isn't ideal, but he makes it work through pure skill. Merle fights dirty nearby, using a broken bottle to slash and stab. His brother's always been vicious in a fight, it's keeping him alive now. Behind you, Daryl shouts, seeing a walker approaching Scott's blind side. The EMT spins, drives his crowbar through the thing's temple without breaking stride. Kid's got combat sense, knows how to fight for his life. They might actually survive this. Pav. Merle Dixon. Merle dances with death, glass shards and walker blood painting his hands crimson. This is what he was made for, violence, chaos, the honest work of staying alive. He spots the prissy EMT fighting near Carol, choosing to save the battered wife over her worthless husband. Smart choice. Ed was deadweight anyway, and Carol's got skills the camp needs. Kid's got priorities straight, even if he's soft about most things. The last walker goes down under Glenn's machete, and suddenly the camp falls silent except for heavy breathing and quiet sobbing. Pav. Scott. 15 walkers dead, 2 camp members bitten and Mercy killed by Shane. Ed Pelletier torn apart while Scott chose to save his wife instead. The mathematics are brutal but simple. They survived because they fought together, because people made hard choices in split seconds. Quest completed. Earn camp's trust. Experience gained. 500 XP. Level up. 4 right pointing arrow 5. Scott stares at the notifications and wants to vomit. Experience points for a man's death. Level advancement purchased with blood and screaming. Carol approaches slowly, Sophia clutched to her chest, and whispers, "Thank you." She doesn't know Scott chose her over Ed with cold calculation. Doesn't know the system guided his decision with statistics and probability. All she knows is she's alive, and her daughter is safe. Maybe that's enough. Pav. Shane Walsh. Shane surveys the aftermath, counting the living and marking the dead. 2 good people lost, but it could have been worse. Much worse. The EMT acquitted himself well, fought smart, saved lives, didn't freeze when it mattered. Shane adds Scott to the short list of people he can count on in a crisis. But he also notes how Scott moved during the fight, the tactical awareness that goes beyond medical training. The kid's hiding something significant, and Shane's going to find out what. Dawn breaks over the quarry, painting the water gold while smoke from funeral pyres drifts skyward. The camp survived its first real test, but everyone knows it won't be the last. The dead don't stay dead anymore, and the living have learned to be afraid of the dark. Chapter 11. Rick's Arrival, Part 1. Chapter 11. Rick's Arrival, Part 1. Pav. Scott. 3 days after the attack, Scott hammers stakes into the quarry's perimeter, sweat dripping despite the morning chill. The camp feels different now, quieter, harder, like glass that's been tempered in fire. People move with purpose, checking escape routes, counting ammunition. The sound of an engine echoes through the valley. Scott's hammer freezes mid-swing. His system pings urgently. New human detected. Single signature, armed. Vehicle approaching, police cruiser. No, not yet. I'm not ready for this. But ready or not, Rick Grimes is about to walk back into his family's life. The police car rounds the bend, dirty white with blue stripes, one headlight busted and the windshield spider-webbed. It rolls to a stop near the RV, engine ticking as it cools. The door opens. Pav. Lori Grimes. Lori drops the laundry she's folding. The soap slips from nerveless fingers as a man emerges from the police car, tall, lean, wearing a blood-stained sheriff's uniform that she knows as well as her own heartbeat. Rick. The word comes out broken, disbelieving. Because this can't be happening. Rick is dead, has to be dead. Shane saw the hospital overrun, saw the building fall. But there he is, disheveled, exhausted, alive. Rick. The scream tears from her throat as she runs. Behind her, Carl's homework falls forgotten as he looks up, sees his father, and breaks into a sprint. Dad. Daddy. Pav. Shane Walsh. Shane's world tilts sideways. He's standing by the fire, discussing watch rotations with Dale, when Lori's scream cuts through the morning air. The sound of absolute joy and absolute devastation mixed together. He turns, sees Rick stumbling from the police car, and for one perfect moment feels nothing but relief. His partner, his brother, alive. Then Carl slams into Rick's arms, sobbing, and reality crashes down. Rick is alive, which means everything Shane believed, everything he built, everything he became, it's all based on a lie. Jesus Christ, Shane breathes. Rick. Pav. Carl Grimes. Carl doesn't care that he's 12 and supposed to be too old for crying. He doesn't care that other people are watching. He just runs until strong arms catch him, until familiar hands ruffle his hair, until his dad's voice whispers broken reassurances. I'm here, Carl, I'm here. God, look at you. You're so big. I thought you were dead. Carl sobs into his father's neck. Shane said you were dead. I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. Carl believes him, has to believe him. Because if his dad can survive the apocalypse and find them in this massive world, then maybe everything will be okay. Pav. Glenn Rhee. Glenn watches the reunion from beside Scott, amazed by the raw emotion playing out in front of them. This is what family looks like when the world ends, desperate, grateful, broken and healing all at once. Holy shit, Glenn whispers. That's him. That's the cop I told you about. Scott nods, his expression carefully neutral. Looks like he found what he was looking for. There's something odd in Scott's voice, like he's not surprised by this moment. But that's impossible, how could anyone expect this? Come on, Glenn says, grabbing Scott's arm. You should meet him. Pav. Rick Grimes. Rick holds his family and tries to process the impossible. They're alive, not just alive, they look healthy, fed, protected. Carl has grown at least 2 inches, and Lori. Lori pulls back from his embrace, her face streaked with tears, and Rick sees something in her eyes that wasn't there before. Guilt, maybe, fear, the weight of decisions made in his absence. How did you find us? She asks. Long story, Rick manages. I woke up in the hospital. Atlanta it was hell. Met this kid, Glenn, who brought me here. Glenn brought you here. Shane's voice cuts through the emotional haze. Rick turns to see his partner approaching, and the expression on Shane's face is complicated. Joy, yes, but something else underneath. Something that makes Rick's cop instincts prickle with warning. Shane. Rick extends his hand. Thank God. I was hoping. Shane pulls him into a fierce embrace instead. You son of a bitch. We thought you were dead. But even as Shane holds him, Rick can feel the tension in his partner's muscles. The way Shane's eyes don't quite meet his. The forced quality of his smile. Something's wrong here. Something I need to understand. Pav. Dale Horvath. Dale observes the reunion with the eye of a man who's lived long enough to read between the lines. Rick's arrival is a blessing. The man has natural leadership written in every gesture, the kind of moral center their group desperately needs. But Shane's reaction concerns him. The younger man's joy seems forced, his posture defensive. And there's something in the way he looks at Lori, something possessive and bitter. We may have gained a leader, but we're about to lose a friend. Dale glances at Scott, noting how the EMT hangs back from the crowd, observing rather than participating. The young man's face is carefully blank, but Dale catches something in his eyes, knowledge. As if Scott was expecting this moment. Pav. Scott. Scott watches the scene unfold with the sick certainty of foreknowledge. Every gesture, every word, every emotion is playing out exactly as he remembers from the show. Lori's guilt-stricken joy, Carl's overwhelming relief, Shane's complex reaction, happiness warring with devastation. Rick Grimes. Relationship initialized. Current status. Evaluating 4100ths. Shane Walsh. Emotional instability detected. Stress levels. Critical. Within an hour, the camp's entire dynamic shifts. People gravitate toward Rick naturally, drawn by his calm competence and moral clarity. He listens to Dale's concerns about water filtration, nods thoughtfully at T-Dog's suggestions about fortification, and asks intelligent questions about their supply situation. Shane stands beside him throughout, playing the supportive partner, but Scott can see the cracks forming. Every time someone defers to Rick's judgment instead of Shane's, those cracks spread a little wider. Glenn mentioned you, Rick says when they're finally introduced. Said you've got good instincts. EMT, right. Rick's handshake is firm, measuring. His eyes are sharp despite his exhaustion, already evaluating Scott as an asset or liability. 5 years with Atlanta Fire Department, Scott confirms. We're gonna need that expertise, Rick says simply. This world, we need people who can think under pressure and act when it matters. It's both a test and an invitation. Rick is building his inner circle, identifying the people he can count on when things go wrong. Scott nods acceptance, ignoring the way Shane's jaw tightens at the exchange. Pav. Shane Walsh. That evening, Shane watches Rick and Lori sit by the water's edge, talking quietly while Carl skips stones nearby. The perfect family reunion, the happy ending Shane thought was impossible. Except it's not happy for everyone. Shane's chest burns with emotions he can't name. 3 months he's protected them. 3 months he's made the hard decisions, kept them fed and safe and alive. 3 months of being the leader, the protector, the man Lori turned to when the nightmares got too bad. And now Rick's back, and it's like none of it mattered. Like Shane was just keeping the seat warm. He notices Scott watching him from across the camp and feels a surge of irrational anger. Another person who fits too easily into Rick's orbit. Another reminder that Shane's temporary kingdom is crumbling. Scott meets his gaze steadily, and for a moment, Shane wonders if the EMT might be an ally. Someone else who understands that leadership isn't about being nice, it's about making the choices that keep people alive. Then Scott looks away, and Shane's hope turns to suspicion. Everyone's choosing sides already, and I'm losing. Pav. Carol Pelletier. Carol watches the drama unfold while mechanically preparing dinner, her hands steady despite the turmoil in her chest. Rick's arrival brings hope. She can see it in how the others respond to him, how even the children seem calmer in his presence. But she also sees Shane's face in the firelight, sees the way his hands clench and unclench when he thinks no one's looking. She recognizes that expression. Ed wore it sometimes, right before the worst beatings. The look of a man who's lost control and blames everyone else for it. Carol glances at Sophia playing nearby and makes a silent promise. If Shane becomes what Ed was, she won't hesitate this time. She's learned what she's capable of when the people she loves are threatened. Pav. Andrea. Andrea cleans her shotgun methodically, muscle memory from hours of practice with Scott. The reunion plays out in her peripheral vision, but her attention keeps drifting to the EMT who taught her to shoot. He's watching everything with that same intense focus she's noticed before, like he's studying a chess game several moves ahead. There's something almost prescient about the way Scott observes people, like he can see patterns others miss. Quite a day, she says, settling beside him. Scott nods, his expression troubled. Change is everything. You think that's bad? Not bad. Just complicated. Andrea follows his gaze to Shane, noting the tension in the man's shoulders, the false quality of his smiles. Shane's having a hard time, she observes. Wouldn't you? 3 months as leader, then your partner shows up alive. There's something in Scott's tone, not quite sympathy, but understanding. Like he's seen this play out before. How do you think it'll end? Andrea asks. Scott's hands still on his gear. Hopefully better than it could. The non-answer tells her everything. Scott expects trouble, and given his track record for being right about these things, Andrea decides to keep her shotgun very clean indeed. Pav. Rick Grimes. Late that night, Rick lies in his tent listening to his wife breathe beside him. She's finally asleep, exhausted by emotion, but Rick's mind won't quiet. Something's wrong in this camp. Not wrong exactly, but unstable. He can feel the undercurrents, the way people look at Shane when they think he's not watching. The way Shane looks at Lori. What happened here while I was gone? What am I missing? Through the tent wall, he can hear restless movement from Shane's sleeping area. His partner isn't sleeping either. Rick remembers Shane's expression when Carl hugged him earlier, devastation quickly masked by forced cheer. Rick closes his eyes and tries to find gratitude for being alive, for being reunited with his family. But he can't shake the feeling that his arrival has started a countdown to something terrible. In another tent, he can hear someone moving quietly, Scott, probably, taking his watch shift. The EMT who fits just a little too perfectly into their group dynamics. Another piece of a puzzle Rick doesn't fully understand yet. Tomorrow he'll start asking the right questions. Tonight, he just holds his wife and prays that whatever's coming, they can face it together. The quarry water laps softly against the shore, and somewhere in the distance, a walker moans in the darkness. Chapter 12. Rick's Arrival, Part 2. Chapter 12. Rick's Arrival, Part 2. Pav. Rick Grimes. Morning brings a camp meeting where Rick outlines his thoughts on security improvements. Most of his suggestions are basic survival tactics, better watch rotation, improved escape routes, weapons maintenance protocols. But as he speaks, Rick notices Dale nodding approvingly and Shane's increasingly sharp looks. It takes him a moment to realize why. Many of his suggestions mirror improvements someone else has already implemented. Who set up the perimeter noise traps? Rick asks. Scott's idea. Glenn volunteers. EMT emergency planning, he said. Rick glances at the young medic, noting how Scott stays quiet, letting Rick lead without competition. Smart. Either genuinely humble or tactically clever. Good thinking, Rick acknowledges. We should expand the system. After the meeting, Rick pulls Scott aside for a private conversation by the quarry's edge. He needs to understand this man who fits so seamlessly into their survival structure. Pav. Scott, walk with me, Rick says, and Scott recognizes the tone. Authority wrapped in invitation, cop voice. They follow the water's edge, far enough from camp for privacy. Rick moves with the careful awareness of a man who's seen too much violence recently, eyes constantly scanning for threats. Shane mentioned you have tactical instincts, Rick begins. Better than expected for medical training. Scott's prepared for this. Emergency scenarios require a lot of strategic thinking. Scene safety, resource allocation, evacuation planning. Similar principles apply here. Rick's tone is neutral, but his eyes are evaluating. Army Reserves, National Guard. Some weekend warrior stuff. Nothing serious. Rick nods, but Scott can tell he doesn't entirely buy the explanation. The sheriff is putting together pieces of a puzzle, trying to understand how an EMT acquired military-level tactical knowledge. You've been good for this group, Rick says finally. People trust you. That matters more than training sometimes. Pav. Andrea. Andrea approaches Scott at the quarry's edge where he's practicing with a hunting rifle. The way he moves is efficient, economical, no wasted motion. Each shot finds its mark with mechanical precision. Mind some company? She asks. Scott looks up, lowering the rifle. Always. Though I should warn you, I'm not much of a teacher. I don't believe that. Andrea settles beside him on the rocks. Shane gave me basic instruction, but I could use more. What she doesn't say. She wants to understand the man who seems to see 3 moves ahead of everyone else. The man who saved her sister during the attack, who teaches with infinite patience, who watches the world like he's reading a book he's memorized. Shooting's 10% technique, 90% mindset, Scott says, handing her the rifle. The physical mechanics are simple. It's the mental game that matters. Pav. Amy. Amy watches her sister work with Scott from across the camp, noting the careful distance Andrea maintains even while learning. Ever since the attack, Andrea's been different, harder, more focused. Determined never to feel helpless again. Scott seems to understand that without being told. He doesn't talk down to Andrea or treat her like she's fragile. Just shows her how to improve, offers quiet encouragement, lets her find her own confidence. Amy likes that about him. Too many men try to protect women by making them weaker. Scott makes Andrea stronger. Pav. Scott. Breathe out slowly, Scott instructs as Andrea lines up her shot. Squeeze the trigger like you're trying not to wake a baby. The rifle cracks, and the can 50 yards away spins off the log. Andrea's third hit out of 5 shots, significant improvement over yesterday's session. Better, Scott says. You're not fighting the weapon anymore. Andrea lowers the rifle, a small smile playing at her lips. I was terrified during the attack. When those things came through the trees, all I could think was how useless I was. How I couldn't protect Amy. You protected her by getting her to safety. That's not useless. Shane says women should focus on support roles. Leave the fighting to the men. Scott's jaw tightens. Shane's an idiot. You've got steady hands, good reflexes, and the determination to improve. Gender's got nothing to do with competence. The vehemence in his voice surprises them both. Andrea studies his face, noting the anger that flashes there before being carefully controlled. You really believe that, she says. It's not a question. I've worked with plenty of female EMTs and firefighters. Some of the best crisis responders I knew were women. Courage isn't about testosterone, it's about doing what needs to be done when you're scared. Pav. Shane Walsh. Shane watches the shooting lesson from behind the RV, his jaw working steadily on a piece of gum that lost its flavor an hour ago. Scott's got Andrea laughing now, relaxed and confident in a way Shane's never managed to achieve. It galls him. Shane's the cop, the one with weapons training, but somehow the EMT connects with people in ways Shane can't. Makes them trust him, rely on him, look to him for guidance. Just like Rick does. Shane spits out the gum and stalks away before he does something he'll regret. Pav. Andrea. As sunset paints the quarry orange and gold, Andrea finally hits 3 targets in a row. The satisfaction is immediate and addictive, power made manifest, competence proven. She laughs, impulsive and genuine, and hugs Scott in celebration. The contact is brief but electric, and when she pulls back, something has shifted between them. Thank you, she says quietly, for not treating me like I'm made of glass. You're stronger than you know, Scott replies, and the sincerity in his voice makes her chest tight. They sit by the water as the sun disappears behind the trees, comfortable in shared silence. Finally, Andrea speaks. You're different from the others. Quieter, like you're always thinking 3 moves ahead. Scott's pulse jumps. Too perceptive, this woman. Too dangerous to his carefully maintained cover. Survival makes you paranoid, he deflects. Or maybe you've seen more than you're saying. It's not accusatory, just observant. Andrea watches him with intelligent eyes, and Scott realizes she's someone who sees through facades. The thought is terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Pav. Dale Horvath. Dale watches the interaction between Scott and Andrea from the RV's door, noting the careful way they orbit each other. Attraction and caution mixed together, 2 people drawn together but holding back. Good for them both, Dale thinks. Andrea needs someone who challenges her, and Scott needs someone who grounds him. The young man carries himself like someone bearing invisible weight, the burden of knowledge or responsibility that ages a person beyond their years. Dale's lived long enough to recognize a man with secrets. The question is whether those secrets will help or harm the group when they inevitably come to light. Pav. Lori Grimes. Lori folds laundry while watching Rick integrate himself back into their lives. He's trying so hard to be normal, to slip back into the role of husband and father as if 3 months of apocalypse never happened. But she can see the changes in him, the way his eyes never stop scanning for threats, how his hand drifts to his weapon when unexpected sounds reach the camp. The man who came back to her is harder than the one who left. And she's changed too. The guilt of her relationship with Shane sits heavy in her chest, unspoken but present in every interaction. Mom. Carl appears at her elbow, young face troubled. Are you and Dad gonna be okay? Lori's heart clenches. Of course, honey, why would you ask that? You seem different, both of you, out of the mouths of babes. Lori pulls Carl close, breathing in the smell of his hair. We're adjusting, that's all. It takes time for families to find their rhythm again. Carl nods, apparently satisfied. But Lori knows it's more complicated than that. They're not the same people they were before. None of them are. Pav. Scott. Walking back to camp with Andrea, Scott feels the weight of developing emotions he hadn't planned for. This isn't the character from the show, this is a real woman, complex and intelligent and determined. Someone worth caring about. His system offers no guidance on matters of the heart, just cold notation. Andrea. Compatible personality matrix. High emotional investment risk. Risk. The story of his new life. Whatever happens, Andrea says quietly as they reach the camp's edge, we look out for each other. Deal. Deal, Scott agrees, knowing he's just made a promise he might not be able to keep. Behind them, Shane emerges from the shadows where he's been watching. His expression is unreadable in the dying light, but something dangerous flickers in his eyes. The camp settles into evening routines, but the undercurrents of tension remain. Rick's arrival has changed everything, and everyone's still figuring out where they fit in the new hierarchy. Scott lies in his tent listening to the sounds of families trying to rebuild themselves, Rick and Lori's whispered conversations, Carl's quiet breathing, Shane's restless movement in his sleeping area. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new complications. But tonight, for the first time since arriving at the camp, Scott allows himself to feel something other than the weight of foreknowledge. Hope, maybe, or at least the possibility that some things might work out better than he remembered. Outside, a walker moans in the distance, and the quarry water laps gently against the shore. Chapter 13. The Gun Run Preparation. Chapter 13. The Gun Run Preparation. Pav. Rick Grimes. The camp meeting starts civil enough. Rick spreads his hand-drawn map of Atlanta across the RV's table, tracing the route he took from the hospital to the tank where he lost consciousness. There's a bag of weapons, Rick explains to the gathered faces. Military-grade firearms, ammunition. Enough to properly arm our people. You sure it's still there? Shane asks, arms crossed. His tone carries skepticism wrapped in something sharper. The tank's where I left it. Unless someone moved a 60-ton Sherman, the bag's still there. Dale adjusts his fishing hat. Atlanta's gotten worse since you escaped, Rick. More walkers, more danger. Which is exactly why we need those guns. The debate erupts from there. Voices raised, competing fears and needs clashing in the confined space. Rick watches the dynamics play out, Dale arguing for caution, Shane pushing back against the plan with barely concealed hostility, Andrea surprisingly supportive. Then Scott raises his hand. Pav. Scott, this is it. The gun run where Merle gets handcuffed to the roof. Where everything changes. His system pings urgently. The Dixon situation, critical juncture approaching. Timeline convergence. 87% probability. Scott's stomach drops as Rick outlines the mission parameters. In the show, this goes catastrophically wrong. Merle's racism and violence nearly get everyone killed, Rick handcuffs him to prevent a massacre, and when they escape, Merle gets left behind. Daryl never forgives the group for abandoning his brother. The guilt and conflict tear through their unity like shrapnel. I'll go, Scott says, surprising himself. The tent falls silent, Shane's head snaps toward him, eyes narrowing. Like hell you will, Shane growls. We need the EMT here, not risking his neck playing soldier. Pav. Shane Walsh. Shane feels the familiar burn of rage in his chest. Another challenge to his authority, another person Rick automatically considers valuable enough to risk. The man's medical training, Shane argues. You want to throw away our only real medic on a supply run. But Rick's already studying Scott with that calculating look Shane knows too well. Measuring, evaluating, deciding without consulting the man who's kept this camp alive for 3 months. You sure about this? Rick asks Scott. Scott nods. You'll need someone with combat medical training if things go sideways. And they will go sideways. The certainty in Scott's voice makes Shane's skin crawl. How does the EMT always seem to know what's coming next? Pav. Daryl Dixon. Daryl spits tobacco juice and studies the EMT from across the fire. Scott's volunteering for a suicide mission, which means either the man's got balls or he's got reasons nobody else knows about. At least someone's got stones, Daryl grunts, earning a sharp look from his brother. Merle laughs, the sound harsh and mocking. Pretty boy playing hero. This oughta be good. Hope you don't cry when things get messy, EMT. Merle, Rick warns. What? I'm just saying, city boy might not have the stomach for real work. Daryl watches Scott's face during Merle's taunts. No anger, no defensiveness. Just careful attention, like he's studying Merle for weaknesses. Smart. Merle respects strength, despises weakness, and can smell fear from a mile away. Scott's playing it exactly right. Pav. Andrea. Andrea catches Scott's eye across the crowded tent, concern tightening her chest. She wants to object, to argue against sending him into danger, but the words stick in her throat. Instead, she mouths, "Be careful." Scott nods, and something passes between them, acknowledgement, promise, shared understanding of risks that can't be spoken aloud. She trusts his judgment, even when she doesn't understand it. But that doesn't stop the cold fear from settling in her stomach. Pav. Glenn Rhee. Glenn studies the route on Rick's map, mental calculations running automatically. Traffic patterns, walker congregations, escape routes. The city's gotten worse since his last major supply run. Streets are more crowded than they were, Glenn observes. Herds shifting, consolidating. We'll need to be fast and quiet. Cube van, T-Dog suggests. More cargo space than the motorcycle. Rick nods. Who else is volunteering? T-Dog raises his hand despite obvious nerves. Glenn's already assumed he's going. It's his city, his expertise they need. That leaves the question of the Dixon brothers. We're in, Merle declares before anyone asks. Ain't letting y'all run off without supervision. Daryl grunts agreement, and Glenn suppresses a sigh. Merle's going to be a problem. The man's a walking conflict generator, and Atlanta doesn't forgive mistakes. Pav. Scott. Hours later, Scott finds himself going over equipment with methodical precision. Crowbar, hunting knife, first aid kit. Items from his system inventory that he'll claim came from Rick's bag if anyone asks. His mind races through possibilities, probabilities, consequences. Can he prevent Merle's handcuffing entirely? Should he? The man's genuinely dangerous, a racist and a hothead who nearly gets everyone killed in canon. But he's also Daryl's brother. And Daryl's trust means everything to Scott's position in the group. Quest active. The Dixon situation. Primary objective. Survive Atlanta, required. Secondary objective. Maintain group cohesion, required. Optional objective. Prevent Merle's abandonment, risk unknown. Footsteps approach through the darkness. Scott looks up to see Daryl emerge from the shadows, crossbow slung over his shoulder. Pav. Daryl Dixon. You gonna watch my brothers back in there? Straight to the point. No small talk, no dancing around the subject. Daryl watches Scott's face in the firelight, reading micro-expressions, body language, the tells that separate honest men from liars. I will, Scott says simply. Merle's an asshole, Daryl continues. I know it. Hell, everyone knows it. But he's blood. The weight of that statement hangs between them. Family loyalty versus group survival. The choice that's torn at Daryl his entire life, protecting a brother who makes self-destruction an art form. I understand, Scott says, and something in his tone convinces Daryl the EMT really does. Daryl grips Scott's shoulder, a gesture of trust and warning combined. Don't make me regret believing in you. Pav. Carol Pelletier. Carol watches the conversation from her tent, recognizing the body language of men making promises about violence. She's seen it before, Ed talking to his drinking buddies, planning some petty revenge or intimidation. But this feels different. Daryl's not planning to hurt someone. He's asking someone else to protect what matters to him. The distinction is important. Carol's learning to read the difference between men who use violence to control and men who use it to protect. It's a survival skill she never knew she needed. Pav. Shane Walsh. Shane observes from his watch position, noting the alliance forming between Scott and Daryl. Another relationship that excludes him, another sign that his authority is being eroded piece by piece. First Rick shows up and immediately assumes leadership. Then Scott arrives and starts implementing tactical improvements Shane should have thought of. Now they're planning a mission to Atlanta without consulting him beyond basic logistics. Used to be my decisions that kept these people alive. Now I'm just another voice in the crowd. The bitterness tastes like metal in his mouth. Pav. Lori Grimes. Lori lies in her tent listening to Carl's quiet breathing, worrying about her husband walking back into the hell he barely escaped the first time. Rick's got that look again, the one he wore before dangerous calls, when he was weighing duty against survival. She wants to argue against the mission, but knows he won't listen. Rick's always been driven by the need to protect, to provide, to fix problems through action rather than words. The irony isn't lost on her. She spent 3 months learning to live without him, and now she's terrified of losing him again. Pav. Dale Horvath. Dale keeps watch from the RV's roof, binoculars scanning the treeline while his mind processes the evening's developments. The dynamics are shifting, alliances forming and fracturing based on loyalty and shared risk. Scott's volunteering for the Atlanta mission troubles him. Not because Dale doubts the young man's courage, but because he recognizes the look in Scott's eyes. The same expression Dale sees in his own mirror, the weight of knowledge, of seeing patterns others miss. What does he know that the rest of us don't? Pav. Scott. Scott finishes his equipment check and stares into the dying fire, tomorrow's mission weighing on his mind like lead. In a few hours, he'll walk into the city where he died in his original life, where Merle's fate hangs in the balance, where every decision ripples outward in ways his system can't predict. Combat readiness. 78%. Mission parameters. Variable. Human factors. Unpredictable. The statistics are meaningless against human unpredictability. Shane's hostility, Merle's volatility, the unknown variables that come from changing canon events. Scott thinks about Daryl's trust, Andrea's concern, the weight of foreknowledge pressing down on his shoulders. Tomorrow he rewrites one of the show's most pivotal moments, and he's not sure if he's hero or villain in this version of the story. Sleep doesn't come easy. Download the app for greater interaction. You can chat with me about my writing experience apart from the comments section. Writer_writer. Download app now. Chapter 14. Atlanta Burning. Chapter 14. Atlanta Burning. Pav. Glenn Rhee. The cube van rolls into Atlanta at dawn, engine rumbling through empty streets that echo with unnatural quiet. Glenn navigates by memory and instinct, avoiding the major thoroughfares where walker herds gather like living rivers. But something's wrong. The city feels different, more dangerous, more crowded with the dead than his mental maps account for. Jesus, T-Dog mutters from the passenger seat. There's more of them than last time. Glenn's knuckles widen on the steering wheel as they pass intersections packed with shambling corpses. His carefully memorized routes are compromised, forcing improvisation that makes his gut clench with anxiety. Pav. Scott. Scott's system lights up like a Christmas tree as they enter Atlanta's heart. Walker signatures. 500 plus detected. Threat level. Extreme. Environmental hazards. Multiple. The horde's grown, shifted. My presence has already created butterfly effects I didn't predict. The realization hits him like cold water. He's been changing things since the moment he arrived at the camp, and those changes have rippled outward in ways his foreknowledge can't account for. More walkers than expected, Rick observes, voice tight with concern. City's been drawing them in, Merle says from the van's rear. All roads lead to Rome, and all dead lead to Atlanta. Pav. Rick Grimes. Rick studies the changed landscape through the van's windshield, cop instincts cataloging threats and escape routes. The mission parameters have already shifted, but turning back isn't an option. They need those weapons. Glenn, how close can you get us to the tank? 3 blocks. Maybe 2 if we're lucky. Rick nods, running through contingencies. They'll need to move fast, grab the bag, and extract before the increased walker population can surround them. Everyone stays together, Rick orders. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. We get in, get the weapons, get out. He catches Merle's reflection in the rear-view mirror and adds, that goes especially for you. Pav. Merle Dixon. Merle grins at the warning, showing tobacco-stained teeth. Wouldn't dream of causing trouble, officer-friendly. The lie tastes sweet on his tongue. Merle's got his own plans for Atlanta, score some of his stash, maybe settle accounts with a few people who owe him money. The group's mission is just convenient transportation. He studies Scott from across the van, noting the EMT's obvious tension. City boy's nervous, which means he's smart enough to be scared. Good. Fear keeps you alive longer than courage. You ready for this, pretty boy? Merle asks. Scott meets his gaze steadily. Ready as anyone can be for walking into hell. Pav. Daryl Dixon. Daryl checks his crossbow's string tension for the 100th time, muscle memory and anxiety demanding constant equipment maintenance. The city feels wrong, too quiet, too dangerous, like a trap waiting to spring. He catches Scott watching Merle with that focused intensity again, like the EMT's reading his brother for tells and weaknesses. Smart. Merle's a walking powder keg, and knowing when he's about to explode is a useful survival skill. Stay close to me, Daryl tells Scott quietly. Merle gets sideways, you don't want to be in the splash zone. Pav. T-Dog. T-Dog grips his crowbar and tries to keep his breathing steady as the van navigates increasingly dangerous streets. This isn't his first time in the city since the outbreak, but it's definitely the most walkers he's seen concentrated in one area. How we supposed to get out of here if they surround us? He asks. Same way we got in, Glenn replies, but his voice lacks conviction. Fast and quiet. T-Dog nods, not entirely convinced. He's volunteered because someone has to watch the group's back, but that doesn't mean he's not scared. Only crazy people aren't scared in Atlanta these days. Pav. Scott. They reach the department store without incident, Glenn's navigation skills threading them through gaps in the walker herds with surgical precision. But Scott's system continues its urgent warnings. Structural instability detected. Walker concentration. Critical mass. Mission parameters. Compromised. The bag retrieval goes smoothly at first. Rick leads them to the tank, recovers his weapons cache, and they begin the extraction process. But then Merle spots something that makes his eyes light up with dangerous interest. Pav. Merle Dixon. Well, Merle drawls, studying the group of survivors taking shelter in the department store's upper floors. Looks like we got ourselves some uninvited guests. Hispanic family, old man, couple of kids. Hiding from the walkers, probably been here for days judging by the makeshift camp they've set up. Perfect opportunity to establish who's really in charge of this operation. Y'all need to move along, Merle announces, hand resting casually on his pistol. This here's our territory now. Pav. Rick Grimes. Rick's blood turns cold as Merle confronts the terrified family. The man's aggressive posture, the way his hand hovers near his weapon, it's a disaster waiting to happen. Merle, stand down, Rick orders. They're not hurting anyone. Neither are we, Merle counters. Just explaining how things work in the new world. The Hispanic father steps protectively in front of his family, and Rick sees the situation spinning toward violence with mechanical inevitability. Pav. Scott. This is it. This is where it all goes wrong. Scott watches Merle's confrontation with the survivors, knowing exactly how this plays out in canon. The argument escalates, Rick has to physically restrain Merle, and the violence attracts a massive walker horde. Everyone needs to calm down, Scott interjects, trying to de-escalate. We can all share the space. Merle whirls on him, eyes blazing with fury. You think you're hot shit with your fancy words, EMT boy. I see how you look at us, like you're better than everyone else. That's not. Shut up, Merle shouts, voice echoing through the building. I'm tired of taking orders from college boys and pretty-faced medics. Pav. Glenn Ree. Glenn's heart sinks as Merle's voice carries through the store, loud enough to wake the dead. Literally. The moaning starts immediately, hundreds of walkers responding to the noise, shuffling toward the building like moths to flame. Through the windows, Glenn can see them gathering, pressing against the glass with increasing pressure. We need to move, Glenn says urgently. Now. But it's too late. The main entrance groans under walker pressure, glass beginning to crack and buckle. Pav. Rick Grimes. The situation deteriorates with stunning speed. Walkers pressing against every entrance, Merle still ranting about respect and authority, the survivors they're supposed to protect cowering in terror. Rick makes a command decision. Merle Dixon, you're under arrest, he declares, producing handcuffs from his belt. You're endangering this group. Try it, Merle snarls, hand moving toward his gun. Rick's faster. The handcuffs snap around Merle's wrist before the man can draw, securing him to a metal roof access pipe. Pav. Scott. Scott watches the handcuffing with sick certainty, knowing they're about to abandon Merle to die. His system flashes an urgent alert. Structural weakness detected, roof access door. Failure probability, 73%. The door won't hold. They need every gun defending it, including Merle's. Rick, Scott says desperately. We need every shooter. The door's not going to hold them. Rick pauses, handcuff key in his grip. For a moment, Scott thinks he's gotten through. Then the roof access door splinters under Walker pressure, and chaos erupts. Pav. T-Dog. T-Dog swings his crowbar in desperate arcs, dropping walkers as they pour through the broken door. But there are too many, and they keep coming in an endless tide of rotting flesh and snapping teeth. The pipe. Scott shouts over the sound of combat. We need to move Merle. T-Dog sees what Scott's talking about. Merle's handcuffed to a structural pipe that's starting to groan under Walker pressure. If it fails, Merle's trapped. Pav. Scott. Scott activates power strike without thinking, bringing his crowbar down on the pipe with enhanced force. The metal screams and buckles, and suddenly Merle's mobile again, still handcuffed but not anchored to a fixed point. Power strike. Rank 2 activated. Stamina, 65/100ths. Rick's eyes widen as he watches Scott's crowbar punch through solid steel like it's aluminum foil. The strength required for that feat is far beyond normal human capability. Pav. Daryl Dixon. Daryl fights with desperate efficiency, crossbow bolts dropping walkers at close range while Scott's impossible strength gives them a fighting chance. The EMT moves through the horde like some kind of supernatural weapon, his crowbar caving in skulls with mechanical precision. How the hell is he that strong? But there's no time for questions. Only survival, escape, and getting his brother to safety. Pav. Merle Dixon. Merle fights one-handed, the handcuffs making weapon use awkward but not impossible. His pride burns at being restrained, but pragmatism keeps him focused on killing walkers instead of settling scores. The EMT saved his life by breaking that pipe. Merle files that information away for future consideration. Pav. Scott. They fight their way down through the building, Scott's enhanced combat awareness guiding them through optimal paths. His system tracks multiple threats simultaneously, highlighting weak points and escape routes. Combat awareness. Rank 1 activated. Multiple target tracking, enabled. But the enhanced abilities come with a cost. Rick and Shane keep watching him with increasingly sharp attention, noting feats of strength and speed that don't match his medical background. Pav. Glenn Rhee. The van represents salvation, 4 wheels and an engine between them and the growing Walker horde. Glenn guns it the moment everyone's aboard, tires screaming as they accelerate through Atlanta's corpse-choked streets. In the rear-view mirror, he can see the department store being overrun completely, walkers pouring through every opening like water through a burst dam. They made it out. Barely. Pav. Rick Grimes. The drive back to camp passes in tense silence. Merle sits in the corner, still handcuffed, glowering at everyone with barely contained rage. Scott helps T-Dog treat a concussion from a fall during the escape. But Rick's mind keeps returning to what he witnessed in the department store. Scott's strength, his combat awareness, the way he moved through walkers like he'd been training for it his entire life. EMTs don't fight like that. Soldiers do. Pav. Scott. The camp appears through the van's windshield like a beacon of safety, cooking fires and familiar faces offering relief from Atlanta's nightmare. But Scott knows the hard questions are coming. Quest update. The Dixon situation. Merle saved from roof, partial success. Abilities exposed, complications added. Rick Grimes. Relationship changed to suspicious respect. Shane Walsh. Relationship changed to hostile suspicion. Daryl immediately takes custody of his still handcuffed brother, shooting Scott a look of pure gratitude before hauling Merle toward the tool shed to find bolt cutters. But Scott feels Rick and Shane's eyes on him as he helps T-Dog to the medical supplies. The questions are coming, and he's not sure what answers he can give that won't destroy everything he's built. Pav. Andrea. Andrea rushes to Scott the moment the van stops, hands checking for injuries with practiced efficiency. He's covered in Walker blood but appears unharmed. What happened out there? She whispers. Scott shakes his head, exhaustion and stress written across his features. Too close. Way too close. She can see there's more to the story, but this isn't the time or place. Later, when they're alone, she'll ask the questions that matter. For now, she's just grateful he came home alive. Pav. Dale Horvath. Dale observes the mission's return from the RV's steps, noting the body language and facial expressions that tell the real story. Success, but at a cost. Questions raised that can't be easily answered. Scott saved Merle's life, but exposed capabilities that don't match his cover story. The young man's walking a tightrope now, and one misstep could send him plummeting. Some secrets are too big to keep forever, Dale thinks. The question is whether the truth will help or destroy him when it finally comes to light. The campfire flickers in the growing darkness, and somewhere in the forest, a walker moans its lonely hunger to the night sky. Chapter 15. The Interrogation. Chapter 15. The Interrogation. Pav. Scott. Sleep doesn't come. Scott lies in his tent staring at the fabric ceiling, replaying every moment from Atlanta, every display of unnatural strength and speed. The pipe he shattered with supernatural force. The way he moved through walkers like some kind of video game character. Rick saw it all. Shane too. They know something's off. His system provides no comfort, just cold analysis. Diplomatic crisis. No tactical solution available. Cover story integrity. 43%. Recommended action. Damage control. Dawn breaks with the sound of footsteps outside his tent. Low voices, deliberate approach. Scott's enhanced hearing picks up Rick's whispered words. Just keep it calm. We need answers, not confrontation. We need to talk. Rick's voice cuts through the morning air like a blade. Scott emerges to find both men waiting, their expressions serious but not openly hostile. Yet. Shane's hand rests casually near his sidearm, not threatening, but ready. Rick's eyes are sharp with the focused intensity Scott recognizes from his EMT days. Cop eyes. Interrogation mode. Sure, Scott says, keeping his voice level. What about Pav? Rick Grimes. Rick studies Scott's face for micro-expressions, tells that might reveal deception. The young man seems genuinely calm, but there's tension in his shoulders that suggests preparation for conflict. Let's walk, Rick suggests. Away from camp. They move toward the quarry's edge in silence, morning mist rising from the water like ghosts. Rick's seen enough interrogations to know the importance of environment, neutral ground, no witnesses, room for honest conversation. That pipe you broke yesterday, Rick begins without preamble. Solid steel, 3-inch diameter. I've seen construction workers struggle with equipment like that. Scott's expression doesn't change. Adrenaline's a hell of a drug. Is it? Shane cuts in, his tone sharp. Because what I saw looked like something else entirely. Pav. Shane Walsh. Shane feels the familiar burn of frustration as Scott maintains his innocent act. 3 months Shane's kept this camp alive, made the hard decisions, protected these people. Now some EMT with convenient answers shows up and everyone acts like he's the second coming. The way you fought through those walkers, Shane presses. Movement, timing, awareness, that wasn't normal training. You called out dangers before we could see them, knew exactly where to position for cover. Military. Emergency medical training includes tactical awareness, Scott replies. Scene safety, threat assessment, extraction under hostile conditions. Shane's jaw clenches. The answer's too smooth, too prepared. Like Scott's been rehearsing this conversation. Pav. Scott, stick to the cover story. Mix truth with misdirection. Don't give them anything they can verify. I trained in mixed martial arts before the outbreak, Scott explains, weaving truth through necessary lies. 5 years, serious dedication. You develop combat reflexes, enhanced awareness. And EMT work, responding to violent calls, gang territories, domestic violence situations, it changes how you read danger. Rick nods slowly. That explains some of it. The apocalypse changes people, Scott continues, injecting genuine emotion into his voice. Some break, some adapt. I adapted, found an edge I can't fully explain, maybe hypervigilance, maybe survival instinct. But I use it to keep people alive. Pav. Rick Grimes. There's something in Scott's tone, raw honesty mixed with carefully controlled information. Rick's heard enough half-truths to recognize the pattern, but he's also seen enough genuine trauma to understand why someone might hold back painful details. Shane mentioned you have uncanny timing with supply discoveries, Rick probes. Almost supernatural luck. Scott's laugh sounds forced. Pattern recognition. Emergency responders learn to think like victims, where they'd hide valuables, stash supplies, barricade themselves. Plus paranoia. I check every hiding spot because I assume someone else thought of it first. And the strength, Shane demands. That pipe. Fear, Scott interrupts. Merle was going to die. Sometimes you find reserves you didn't know you had. Pav. Shane Walsh. Before Shane can push harder, footsteps crunch through the underbrush behind them. Shane spins, hand moving to his weapon, then relaxes as Daryl emerges from the tree line. Son of a bitch was following us. Y'all having a nice chat? Daryl asks, crossbow slung casually but ready. His tone is deceptively mild, but Shane recognizes the protective stance. Daryl's placing himself between Scott and authority. Just asking some questions, Rick says carefully. About what? Pav. Daryl Dixon. Daryl studies the body language, Rick tense but reasonable, Shane coiled like a spring about to break, Scott calm but alert. An interrogation, not a conversation. Y'all questioning the man who saved my brother's life. Daryl's voice carries an edge of warning. Scott's solid. Don't matter if he's stronger than he looks or lucky or whatever. He's got our backs. Daryl, Shane starts. Nah. Daryl cuts him off with finality. I seen enough to know Scott ain't the problem here. Merle was gonna die on that roof, and Scott made sure he didn't. That's all I need to know about character. Pav. Rick Grimes. Rick weighs the moment, Daryl's loyalty, Scott's explanations, Shane's obvious hostility. The tracker's judgment carries weight. Daryl doesn't trust easily, but when he does, it's absolute. Fair enough, Rick decides. But Scott, if there's more to your story, I hope you'll trust us with it eventually. Scott nods, and Rick sees genuine gratitude in his expression. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you protecting Merle despite everything. We don't abandon people, Rick states simply. It's both principle and warning. Shane's expression suggests disagreement, but he holds his tongue. For now. Pav. Scott. Later, Scott sits alone by the water's edge, processing the close call. His hands shake slightly, delayed stress response from walking the tightrope between truth and deception. Too many near misses. Rick's suspicious but willing to trust. Shane's actively hostile, and I'm one mistake away from everything unraveling. Footsteps approach across the gravel. Scott looks up to see Andrea, her expression concerned but not judgmental. Rough morning? She asks, settling beside him. Scott manages a weak smile. You could say that. Pav. Andrea. Andrea studies Scott's profile, noting the exhaustion he's trying to hide. Whatever Rick and Shane questioned him about has left him shaken. I don't care what they think, she says quietly. You saved Merle when you could have let him be abandoned. That tells me who you are. Scott's throat works as if swallowing difficult words. What if you don't know the whole story? Do any of us? Andrea counters. We all have secrets now, things we've done to survive. Whatever yours is, I trust you. Pav. Scott. The simple faith in Andrea's voice hits Scott harder than any interrogation. She doesn't know about the system, the transmigration, the knowledge that makes him fundamentally different from everyone else. But she trusts him anyway. Andrea. Scott begins, then stops. What can he say? That he's from another world. That he knows she's supposed to die in a few years. That every choice he makes is based on foreknowledge of a TV show. It's okay, Andrea says, taking his hand. You don't have to explain everything. Just, don't shut me out completely. Her fingers intertwine with his, warm and real and grounding. For a moment, Scott allows himself to forget about systems and quests and changing canon events. There's just a woman who cares about him, and the terrifying possibility of genuine happiness. Pav. Dale Horvath. Dale watches the interaction from the RV's steps, his heart aching for two people trying to find connection in an impossible world. He's observed enough to know Scott carries secrets that burden him, but also enough to see the young man's essential decency. We all become someone different in crisis. The question is whether we become better or worse. In Scott's case, Dale suspects better. The man could have let Merle die, probably should have, given Merle's nature, but chose salvation over convenience. That speaks to character that transcends whatever mysteries he might be hiding. Pav. Shane Walsh. Shane observes the touching scene between Andrea and Scott from behind the RV, his jaw working steadily on tasteless gum. Another relationship forming around Scott, another person choosing the EMT over established authority. Rick defends him. Daryl protects him. Now Andrea's falling for him. Meanwhile, I'm the one who kept everyone alive for 3 months, and I'm treated like the problem. The bitterness tastes like copper in his mouth. Shane spits out the gum and stalks away before he says something that can't be taken back. Pav. Carol Pelletier. Carol hangs laundry and watches the camp's emotional dynamics play out with the eye of someone who survived years of reading subtle cues. Shane's anger is familiar, the rage of a man who believes the world owes him something it's not delivering. She's seen that expression before. Ed wore it sometimes, right before the worst violence. Shane's breaking down. The question is whether he'll hurt himself or others when he finally snaps. Carol glances at Sophia playing nearby and makes a mental note to keep her daughter away from Shane when possible. She won't be trapped by another man's rage, not anymore. Pav. Scott. That evening, the camp settles into routines with artificial normalcy. Dinner conversation, children's laughter, the comfort of shared tasks. But Scott feels the undercurrents, Shane's isolation, Rick's careful observation, the weight of secrets pressing down like atmospheric pressure. Rick Grimes. Tentative trust 50/100ths. Shane Walsh. Hostile distrust 5/100ths. Warning. Potential antagonist detected. Daryl Dixon. Unshakable loyalty 95/100ths. Andrea. Deepening bond 70/100ths. His system quantifies the relationships, but numbers can't capture the complexity of human emotion. Andrea's faith feels undeserved. Rick's willingness to trust despite suspicion speaks to the man's essential decency. And Daryl's loyalty, unexpected, absolute, potentially dangerous, anchors Scott in ways the tracker probably doesn't understand. Merle approaches as Scott cleans his crowbar, the older Dixon moving with unusual restraint. Heard you caught some heat about yesterday, Merle says quietly. Scott looks up, surprised by the subdued tone. Some questions. Nothing I couldn't handle. Merle nods slowly. For what it's worth, you could have let me die. Would have been easier. Most people would have chosen easier. It's not gratitude exactly, Merle's too proud for that, but acknowledgement. Recognition of debt between men who understand the weight of hard choices. Everyone deserves a chance to prove they can be better, Scott replies. Merle's laugh is harsh but not mocking. You believe that? Really? I have too. The simple answer seems to surprise Merle. He studies Scott for a long moment, then nods and walks away without another word. Pav. Lori Grimes. Lori watches her husband move through evening routines with forced normalcy, noting the tension he's trying to hide. Rick's always been transparent to her, every mood, every worry written in the set of his shoulders and the line of his jaw. Tonight he's processing something complex. Probably the situation with Scott, judging by the morning's private conversations and camp whispers. Everything all right? She asks when Rick settles beside their fire. Just trying to figure people out, Rick admits. Make sure we're making good decisions. Lori follows his gaze to where Scott and Andrea sit talking quietly by the water. You don't trust him? I want to, Rick says carefully. But there's more to his story than he's sharing. Isn't there always? These days. Rick nods, but his expression remains troubled. Leadership means making judgment calls with incomplete information, and Scott represents too many variables for comfort. As full darkness settles over the quarry, Scott lies in his tent listening to the camp's nighttime sounds. Whispered conversations, quiet movement, the eternal backdrop of distant walker moans. His system displays relationship statistics and probability matrices, but they feel meaningless against the weight of genuine human connection. I saved Merle and earned Daryl's loyalty. Gained Rick's grudging respect despite his suspicions. Made an enemy of Shane. And somehow, in the middle of all this chaos, found something real with Andrea. The thought terrifies him more than any walker horde. Because caring means vulnerability, and vulnerability means the possibility of loss he's not sure he could survive twice. Outside, a walker moans in the forest, and someone on watch shifts position with quiet professionalism. The quarry water laps gently against the shore, and for a moment, Scott allows himself to imagine this might actually work, building a life, protecting people he cares about, becoming someone worthy of the trust they're placing in him. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new threats to navigate. But tonight, wrapped in the fragile peace of human community, Scott Alen falls asleep holding on to hope. +1 chapter after every 3 reviews. More power stones equals more chapters. To supporting me in Patreon. Love The Walking Dead, Shelter System. Unlock more chapters and support the story. With exclusive access to 24+ chapters on my Patreon, you get more chapters if you ask for more in few days plus new fanfic every week. Your support starting at just $6 per month helps me keep crafting the stories you love across epic universes like, in The Witcher with Avatar powers, in The Vikings with Deja Vu system, Stranger Things Demogorgon Tamer. By joining, you're not just getting more chapters, you're helping me bring new worlds, twists, and adventures to life. Every pledge makes a huge difference. Right finger join now at patreon.com/Stefanex5 and start reading today.